welcome into TYT's The Conversation. It is your host, Adrienne Lawrence. And today I am joined by Canela Lopez, health reporter for Insider, who covers trans healthcare policy, transphobia, and trans homicides. Welcome in, Canela.
Great, thank you so much for having me on, Adrienne.
Thanks for joining us. And so Canela, according to the Insider database, 2020 was the deadliest year on record for transgender people in the United States. What is going on?
Right, so the project did show that 44 people were killed in 2020 alone, which is higher than any year prior. In our research, what we looked at were the different trends that really contribute to this issue. And what we're seeing is it's a combination of two factors. The first being that reporting is just getting better about these homicides. Unfortunately, many of the victims of these kinds of crimes get misgendered, whether it be by local media, whether it be by the police, and oftentimes these crimes do go underreported. So better knowledge about trans people has made our reporting more accurate on it, which is good. But it's also showing that these trends are getting worse over time. For example, in 2021 alone, we're already at 22 deaths, which is, we're not even halfway through the year, and we're halfway through the amount that we saw last year, which it really just shows that the pandemic has contributed to this. The ongoing problems of racism and transphobia have contributed to this matter, and it's not really going anywhere.
Yes, it sounds extremely troublesome and very deadly. And so can you tell us a little bit about these murders in terms of, is there a pattern here? Or is it romantic entanglement? Is it random hate crime, don't know the other person? Is there a pattern that we can see in terms of these trans people who are being targeted and killed?
Definitely. I think it's important to distinguish that while some of them are certainly hate crimes and it's certainly committed by people who are targeting trans folks, an important distinction is that not all of these killings are hate crimes. It's also the fact that trans women of color in particular are very vulnerable in this country because of systemic issues such as poverty, systemic racism and treatment by the police. We also see that people are just more exposed because homelessness is a big problem for queer folks, specifically queer people of color. So having a lot of vulnerabilities at many different intersections are really what open the floodgates up to be for folks to be attacked. So it's a number of factors.
Yes, it sounds like it. And I would assume that having this pandemic didn't help with a lot of people losing their housing, their economic source. And I would imagine since it hit people of color as a group just harder, that also fell very significantly on the trans community of color.
Oh, absolutely. And in particular, even looking at how the Trump administration handled many legal protections for trans people, it definitely is fair to say that the attitudes of whether it be local lawmakers or federal lawmakers really contributed to the attitudes of people who then go out and commit these crimes. Even in 2021, we're seeing this massive wave of anti-trans policy, and those kinds of attitudes, when they're state sanctioned, do trickle down into the general public and essentially say it's okay to target a group of people because they are more vulnerable.
Yeah, and we're seeing kind of the consequences of that in the Trump administration and unfortunate rhetoric that they push. And we're also seeing a current attack on trans people in the trans community when it comes to athletes and women in sports. And so I guess, how do you see all of those attacks end up culminating into that bigger issue of potentially death?
Right, absolutely. Well, I think it's really important to understand that these laws really do trickle into the bigger issue of homicides against transgender people because it's an overall attitude problem with the United States. So when local lawmakers sanction transphobia and in fact write it into law, it then makes it okay essentially to attack trans people for being ourselves. And the issue with that is that essentially all of these problems are connected by one root belief, which is that trans people are lying about who we say we are. And that is what makes specifically trans women very vulnerable to violence, whether it be street harassment, whether it be through lovers. It's something that is a larger problem.
Yes, very much so. And unfortunately, as we see the numbers continue to show up and to show up at greater rates when it comes to homicides, deaths of trans people, it seems to be that these numbers don't truly reflect the real number of deaths of trans victims. And why do you think that is?
So the biggest problem that Madison Hall and I, my colleague who put together the project with myself, saw when discussing the trends was that oftentimes, because of the way local police report on these deaths, oftentimes what is reflected either in the birth certificate of the victim or the identification card of the victim is what's reported. So if someone doesn't have access, for example, to be able to change their gender marker on their ID, in several states it's very difficult to change the gender marker. So it's important to understand that when there are laws that are enforcing these difficulties in being able to change even legal documentation, it makes it harder for victims to actually be reported correctly. This also has to do with, we can see it in families. Sometimes it isn't safe for a lot of trans victims to be out in general to their families, or they don't have ties to their families because of the lack of education when it comes to queer and trans folks in general. So when a family doesn't know the full extent of who their child is, they're most likely going to uphold whatever the police are saying and misgender them publicly. So then it just kind of gets chalked up and thrown under the table, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and the individual's identity doesn't get to be recognized on that public level as it should be. And I don't think people fully appreciate the hurdles that trans people have to go through to be fully recognized. One of my best girlfriends is an attorney. She's a trans woman, and they still dead name her in court because the state in which she practices in will not recognize her as a whole individual by her identity. And so these things happen every single day, and there must be change. And I know that you all are working very hard toward making change with the Insiders Transgender Homicide Project. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So we decided to put the project together in December of last year because we had been seeing obviously this horrible trend that has been ongoing in our community. But 2020 was particularly brutal. I think it was in October that it officially became the most deadly year for trans people on record. So we decided that it was really urgent to not only report on the individual deaths, but also look at it as a trend, especially because specific communities, particularly Black trans women and Puerto Rican trans women, are very vulnerable. So we wanted to do the work that the US government, quite frankly, should already be doing, but isn't, of tracking these deaths and quantifying these numbers. And also speaking to the families of victims who so often are not spoken to when we discuss this broader issue of transphobic violence. The goal eventually of this project is to act as a service for different research organizations to hopefully build off of the project, look at the trends in these steps and be able to make use of it in some way. Because honestly, all of the experts that we spoke to about this matter said that the first step that we need to take as a country in addressing this national issue is to track and put names to this data. Because if the data doesn't exist, the problem doesn't exist on paper.
Absolutely. And are you getting any support from local authorities or federal authorities or anyone at any level?
Absolutely. We've actually had a really nice outpouring of support from local lawmakers. We've been retweeted by a few prominent activists, which is really great. And also, for me personally, the most important approval is from the families of these victims, because so often these narratives get written by larger media organizations and oftentimes don't consult the people who it is impacting the most intimately. So I think that has been probably what's felt the best about this project. It's that ultimate approval.
That's very cool. And I know you are changing lives and making an impact. And so if people are more interested in finding out about Insiders Project and the work that you are doing, where can they find more out about the project in addition to more about you?
Absolutely. So everyone should absolutely go check out the Trans Homicide Project, which can be found at insider.com. If you Google the Transgender Homicide Project, we are hopefully the first result. If not, we're on the first page of results at least. I think that they should also follow both myself at V Canela Lopez on Twitter and also Madison Hall. We're both journalists who cover these issues and really try and dig deep in looking at how this country approaches transphobia. So, yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. Canela Lopez, health reporter for Insider. We really appreciate all of your contributions also in your work in the project, and continue please to uplift the message.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me on.
I'm back to gaslighting. Did you and I talk about gaslighting on Old School?
Probably.
That boss gaslit all his female employees. People who manipulate others like that make you feel like you're the weirdo. Why won't you punch yourself in the face? What is wrong with you? And you're like, oh my God, I feel so bad. Why didn't I just punch myself in the face and poke my eye out? I'm 47 and I just figured it out like earlier this year.
You figured out somebody was doing it to you, or that you were
that it was that it would have been happening my whole life and I didn't realize it.
Right.
My name is Cassandra Hanks. I've been with TYT for 3 years. I am a video editor and a photographer. A main perk for working for TYT is, as being their main photographer, I get to photograph and sometimes meet some of the celebrities that come through. Susan Sarandon was amazing because she brought her dog Penny. Tom Morello is probably my favorite because I love rock music. Meeting people like Joss Whedon and Quentin Tarantino as being some of the reasons why I got into filmmaking and photography was like a dream come true.
All right, well, the Young Turks special election day coverage dropping.
An amazing power panel.
Look at this panel. You want to talk about power?
Like a smart Destiny's Child.
We're all too strong. We start a revolution. Yes, another one.
Aren't you excited?
Wow.
And then best writers in the country are right here on this panel, with the obvious exception of John Idaho.
Why is he lying? Because these are acts that you can commit with impunity.
Most of us are usually in boxer shorts underneath.
I went with the pants today.
This is the first ever power panel with Donald Trump as president.
We have elected the top Twitter troll in the country.
We have to stop pretending that race is not an issue in this country.
Now keep in mind, racism had gone away until Barack Obama brought it back.
That's right.
They want to protect life so much that they want to ensure that insurance companies don't cover your maternity care.
I've been a fan of TYT, I believe, for the last 6 years.
5 years.
3 years now. 7 years.
4 years now.
2.5 years. I just started because she got me into it.
My boyfriend actually watches it every morning and every night, so I kind of just started watching it with him, and I love it. I mean, it's the only way that I find my news.
Looking through YouTube, looking for political shows that look cool.
I came across a very angry rant from Cenk, and that's when I knew.
So I was immediately in love with the show.
And then I haven't missed a live show since then.
10 times a day, I watched the show in the morning.
Whenever I had a bad day at high school, Young Turks.
Man, Cenk is just so blunt and honest, and I love the honesty, and there's no BS behind the news, and they just tell everything like it is.
There's nobody censoring them. There's nobody there to say you can't do this, you can't say that.
That feel of authenticity makes it seem like what they're saying is true.
I feel like I get the real story from the Young Turks.
I am TYT.
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 Breaking news with Brett Ehrlich. This is Brett Ehrlich with breaking news with Brett Ehrlich. Bernie Sanders wants to break Wall Street, and he wants to break it real bad.
Our system is inherently rigged against the will of the people.
They have 50% of the vote, and in a democracy, they should have 50% of the seats.
But if you live in an insanely gerrymandered district, your vote functionally doesn't matter.
We drew the map in a way that even though we get 50% of the vote, we're gonna get 13 out of the 18 seats.
You don't actually have the ability to translate the will of the voters in your area into actual government policy.
They should not be allowed to gerrymander these districts. We should actually have a democracy.
It is Adrienne Lawrence, and I am back with a conversation. And now I am joined by Chris Stewart. He's the Chief Executive Officer of Brightbeam and co-host of the 8 Black Hands podcast. Welcome in, Chris.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Yes, thank you for joining us. And as I understand it, you know a little bit about critical race theory, which seems to be at the forefront of so many conversations today, particularly as it concerns school curriculum. So I was wondering if you can kind of tell the people, what is it?
You know, critical race theory is basically it's a framework for understanding how race as a construct has been weaponized over time and has become part of the law, the fabric of how we govern America, how we govern our institutions, everything from the way that police officers are administrating policing to communities, to how courts work and how schools work, how elections work, that racism is more than individual bigotry between individuals, but it is actually something that is embedded within our systems, and we must root it out. CRT is the framework for rooting it out, and it's under attack.
Yeah, it definitely seems to be under attack. And I know that critical race theory is very powerful in that it interrogates the role race really plays in our society and largely kind of looks at it through a legal law level, and that it was Kimberly Crenshaw who kind of brought it into being, so to speak, in terms of that legal angle. And so generally, it's my understanding that it's taught in law. And so why are a lot of these educators at the local kind of public school level concerned about it?
Well, you know, it's got even further roots back before it was a legal concept. What came out of the civil rights movement was a lot of disappointment that all of the good work that was done during the civil rights movement didn't amount in the type of advancement and progress, socially speaking, economically, politically speaking, for people of color that was expected from the people that worked in the civil rights movements. CRT became a way for saying, you know, the problem is deeper than we really thought it was. It's not just a situation where black and white folks are going to sit next to each other and all of a sudden start loving each other over a period of time, and then everything's going to change. It actually was more deeply rooted into our institutions, and people within the legal studies departments, people like Derek Bell and others who had experience in civil rights, started to look more deeply into the law and into the structures of our rules of society, the rules of the rules that we live by, and started to see that you could have things be very racist in our society without them looking like they are. They could look colorblind. The war on drugs is a great example of that. You know, passing a disparity between powder cocaine and crack cocaine, there are very clearly racial implications to that decision to make different punishments. But you could conceivably say that it was a colorblind policy. It really wasn't. Now, you asked the question about why are educators so upset about this? They weren't. The short answer is that no one was really talking about this. There is a concerted effort of people who want a white ethno-state and feel like they're losing ground politically to rush to the Capitol houses and introduce bills that are in search of a problem. There was no real problem. Critical race theory there's not an explosion of it. In fact, the opposite is true. Many people of color worry that our real history is being whitewashed in public schools, that our kids are not being told the truth about how we got to where we are today. But yet you have legislators, by my last count, at least 12 bills either introduced or passed at the state level in states that are going to outlaw the rightful teaching about things like systemic racism. It's amazing, though, that it's gotten so much coverage, like 2 to 3 times more coverage on the right than on the left. So you know that it's a campaign, and you know that it's not a campaign for something good.
No, it doesn't seem to be that way. I do find it to be rather comical, seeing these parents and whatnot, seeing the videos of them crying at school board meetings. I don't want my child to learn critical race theory. It's like your child doesn't have the acumen level to understand it. It's not going to be taught to them. What are you talking about? But unfortunately, I think as a product of that it's going to, as you kind of mentioned, it's going to further suppress more truth and information and knowledge under this whole veil that it must be CRT. And so where do you think people are going to go next with this?
You know, I'm thinking it's going to start hitting the school boards next. You know, the first step is to get states and governors to sign laws that kind of start putting a chilling effect on classrooms, start muzzling educators, stop educators from teaching not just critical race theory, because I just want people to be very clear about this. Anything that looks like anti-racism is being thrown into this bucket called critical race theory. Anything around social, some of the laws have been very clear to not just say critical race theory. Is in fact, some of them say social justice programming. So a lot of things are being thrown into this one bucket. It starts at the state level, and then next thing you know, you do have teachers that are being muzzled, and you have school board members that are being run out of town because they are pro social justice teachings. Dallas is a good case of that. There was a recent, suburban Dallas, recent school board election. The school board members and the city council members ran on being against critical race theory, social justice, and social justice programming, and they won. Like they swept the room. If all policy is local, you know what happens once those school boards start turning over and changing like that. The kids in those districts are going to be robbed of real education, a real history, and they're not going to be adequately prepared for the world that we live in. They're going to be prepared for the world 10 years ago. 20 years ago, 30 years ago.
Absolutely, and unfortunately, I'd like to think that seems to be something that's very commonplace in our nation, and then this idea of keeping people dumb. It makes them easy to control as opposed to giving them the knowledge and the information they need so that they can actually understand the world around them. And so where do you think this will go in terms of a federal level? Because we have Joe Biden in office. It seems like he's really turned back a lot of the things that Trump tried to institute, including, whatever he had passed that said we can't have critical race theory taught involving federal contractors or diversity training. So I guess with this administration, do you expect any kind of involvement?
I think that's a great question. I think that there's still going to be attempts at the federal level to do what states are doing right now, but it's not going to go very far because you have Joe Biden in office. He did reverse some of the mandates that came from the Trump administration to outlaw critical race theory within federal agencies and the federal government. Doesn't mean that we should go to sleep on it, though. We should be very, very carefully watching the other ways that this manifests itself. I do want to call out, though, that this is not so much a policy campaign, I think, on the other side for them to win. I really believe that this is just a way to whip up their base in preparation for the 2022 midterm elections, and to really get the white grievance machine going, and the outrage farming going, and getting the keyword kind of keyword farming online to really bend to their will. And I don't know that that's going to work. I really do trust the American people that the majority of us are more sane than this. But when you're getting laws passed, I think is when we should all take things very seriously. And they are getting laws passed that put a chilling effect on speech, free speech, on a fact-based reality, on real history, on teaching kids about how their government actually works and how systems have worked well for some and haven't worked for others. That's a pretty big deal when you're literally getting bills passed to make people dumber.
Yeah, and you know what? You have a lot more faith than I do, because I don't trust the American people to make the smart decision, because we live in a system that enjoys fear mongering and creating an us-them narrative. And as we saw all of those votes come in for Donald Trump at this last election, I just don't know that people can make the best decision for our nation collectively, as opposed to feeding into their fears or maybe even their ego. But in terms of the future of critical race theory, has it had kind of an adverse response in terms of not necessarily being quelled, that now there's a spark in people, getting more involved and learning more about it?
I would love to say yes. I would hope that that's the case. I would hope that more people want to actually check into what critical race actually is. As a matter of fact, anybody watching this who considers themselves an intelligent person, I would hope that you would go out and read for yourself what critical race theory actually is, and do a little bit of study and come up with your own ideas about what it is. I don't know that that's exactly what's going to happen writ large, and I don't think that we're going to win this war with people who are already set to disbelieve anything that has to do with making racial justice come true in this world. But we can ask. We can ask anybody listening and watching, especially when it comes to your schools, be thoughtful consumers of the news and of the truth of critical race theory. And when this gets to a school near you, actually stand up for the right thing. Make sure that your kids are going to get a real history, get the true history.
Oh, that would be something that I would definitely enjoy. Unfortunately, I don't necessarily know that that's going to come to pass either, given how much our world has tried to suppress the information and the history in the past. But we only have about a minute left. So is there anything you want to plug or get out there before we say goodbye?
No, my organization Brightbeam actually continuously puts out the voices of teachers, students, and parents to find the right path to equity, to make sure that we're doing the best that we can for our kids. So come and see us, brightbeamnetwork.org. We are always putting out content around equity in education and in schools, and this is like one of our major issues right now.
Awesome, thank you so much for joining us. Chris Stewart, CEO of Brightbeam and co-host of the 8 Black Hands podcast. Thanks for joining us, Chris.
Thank you.
Welcome everyone. You're watching The Young Turks with Anna Kasparian. I'll be doing the first hour of the show solo today, and John Iadarola will join me for the second hour, where we will do all of the updates on the conflict in Israel. The story is rapidly developing, unfortunately, in all the wrong ways, but we will tell you what's happening on the ground and what we've learned in the last 24 hours in regard to Israeli airstrikes in Gaza and Hamas's retaliation, which of course includes rockets that are very quickly intercepted by Israel's Iron Dome. But we're gonna hold on that story because I would like to have John Iadarola here with me to help discuss it. In the first hour today, though, we are gonna discuss the ongoing war within the GOP. There is an update on the story involving Representative Liz Cheney and her defiance in regard to avoiding the lies that the has decided to latch onto about the 2020 election. We'll also talk about the comeback for corporate stock buybacks, which is an interesting story to ignore for the mainstream media, considering the fact that the US Chamber of Commerce just urged the Biden administration to end unemployment benefits early to basically force workers back to jobs that pay incredibly low wages. So I'm looking forward to sharing that story and more with you. But before we get to all of it, I just want to encourage you guys to like and share the stream. We want to get as many people watching this stream as possible. We want to get the message out there. And it's just an easy way to help support the show and support what we do here. So thank you to all of you who do that on a regular basis, and for anyone who's considering doing it, thank you, we really, really, really do appreciate it. All right, well, moving on to our first story of the day, the ongoing war in the GOP. The House GOP have now officially voted to remove Liz Cheney as chair of the Republican conference. This was something that Cheney was already being threatened by because of the fact that she refuses to lie to the American people about what really transpired during the 2020 election. While Trump loyalists want to pretend as though the election was somehow stolen from Trump, Liz Cheney is one of the few Republican lawmakers who's actually told the truth. Now, before Republican lawmakers voted, Cheney gave a speech that was booed by her own colleagues. In that speech, she said, quote, "We cannot let the former president drag us backward and make us complicit in his efforts to unravel our democracy. Down the path lies our destruction and potentially the destruction of our country." She also said, "If you want leaders who will enable and spread his destructive lies, I'm not your person. You have plenty of others to choose from. That will be their legacy, but I promise you this, after today, I will be leading the fight to restore our party and our nation to conservative principles, to defeating socialism, to defending our republic, and to making the GOP worthy again of being the party of Lincoln." Now, clearly I've got no love for Liz Cheney, but she does deserve some credit for being willing to tell the truth, even as her own colleagues threatened her along the way. And after her speech, we found out that Representative Virginia Fox put forward a motion to remove her. She was removed from her post by a voice vote. So this wasn't an anonymous vote, which was initially the plan. Cheney had demanded that they hold a vote that is not anonymous. People should be on the record. They kind of chose a middle ground where they did this through a voice vote, and it's obviously very difficult to determine who voted which way. But nonetheless, she's been removed from that position. Representative Steve Scalise, also a member of the GOP leadership, said, "It's not about right or wrong," essentially saying the quiet parts out loud. "It's about the focus of our conference and focusing on pushing back on the agenda that's being pushed by the Biden administration." Now, I would argue that it's not impossible, it's not even difficult to push back against policies you disagree with, while also simultaneously acknowledging the truth, the reality of the election, the actual events that transpired. But Republicans are gonna go along with whatever Donald Trump has to say. Donald Trump is delusional enough to believe that the election was stolen from him, even though he and his lawyers failed to provide a single shred of evidence indicating that there was widespread voter fraud or any type of attempt to steal the election from him. But Republicans are gonna go along with his talking points because the Republican Party is now clearly the party of Trump, to the point where some of the most conservative members of their caucus will be pushed back against, will be removed from leadership positions just for telling the American people the truth. Now, after the vote, Liz Cheney spoke to the press and had a pretty significant commitment to the future of the Republican Party and Donald Trump's political future as well. Let's watch.
I will do everything I can to ensure that the former president never again gets anywhere near the Oval Office. We have seen the danger that he continues to provoke with his language. We have seen his lack of commitment and dedication to the Constitution.
So she's planning on fighting aggressively against the possibility of Donald Trump running again and making his way to the Oval Office. I really don't know what her game plan is, because in order to do that, you would need to take a look at the Republican electorate and find a way to persuade them that Donald Trump is not the right leader for the party, not the right president to represent Republican constituents. And so far, any and all efforts to do that, whether it's by the left, clearly, or by right-wingers like Liz Cheney, it just has not worked. It has not worked. So it's really unclear what the future of Republicans like Liz Cheney is gonna look like. Is she going to suffer consequences by her own constituents for having the audacity to tell the truth about the election? And so it's hard to really predict what the future holds, but if you look at the current polling in regard to Donald Trump's popularity with Republican voters, there's a reason why Republican lawmakers are supporting him and going along with his talking points, because they know that their voters will probably come out against them. There will be considerable backlash if they say anything against Donald Trump's narratives. Now, one other thing to bring up that I think is pretty relevant here. Republican lawmakers decided to leave the room as Liz Cheney gave her speech on the House floor. In fact, some of her colleagues even booed her. I want to show you a small portion of the speech that she gave on the House floor. This happened prior to the voice vote.
Millions of Americans have been misled by the former president. They have heard only his words, but not the truth, as he continues to undermine our democratic process, sowing seeds of doubt about whether democracy really works at all. Our duty is clear. Every one of us who has sworn the oath must act to prevent the unraveling of our democracy. This is not about policy. This is not about partisanship. This is about our duty as Americans. Remaining silent and ignoring the lie emboldens the liar. I will not participate in that. I will not sit back and watch in silence while others lead our party down a path that abandons the rule of law and joins the former president's crusade to undermine our democracy. Attacks against our democratic process and the rule of law empower our adversaries and feed communist propaganda that American democracy is a failure. We must speak the truth. Our election was not stolen, and America has not failed.
She's getting what she deserves. The chickens have come home to roost. And let me be clear about what I mean here. While I give her credit for the fact that she's willing to suffer the consequences to tell the truth about what actually transpired during the 2020 election, she is standing there and literally lying about communist propaganda. That there's communist propaganda. What communist propaganda? So Liz Cheney and Republicans like her have lied to the American people consistently throughout their tenure. And when you do that, when you are part and parcel of this militarized effort in the Middle East, when you're someone who pushed the American people to support and accept a preemptive war in Iraq based on false pretenses, based on a lie that there were weapons of mass destruction, when you have built your entire career off of lies, you're gonna lose people and they're gonna have a lot less interest in what you have to say, even when you're telling the truth. She had destroyed her credibility way earlier. I mean, she's continuing to do so while she's lying on the House floor by making up stories and fear mongering about communist propaganda. What communist propaganda? Our corporate media would never dare to challenge corporate power in this country. I mean, that's one of the biggest problems. But she's worried about communist propaganda. Okay. Well, I also want to get to Trump's statement on this because, of course, he's taken a victory lap. He recognizes that he's taken full control of the GOP, and he says this about Liz Cheney. Liz Cheney is a bitter, horrible human being, he says, with no irony. I watched her yesterday and realized how bad she is for the Republican Party. She has no personality or anything good having to do with politics or our country. She's a talking point for Democrats, whether that means the border, the gas lines, inflation, or destroying our economy. Now, Elise Stefanik, who is also a GOP lawmaker, has raised her hand and she's like, I'd like to take that leadership role that we've just ousted Liz Cheney from. Elise Stefanik has actually voted with Trump less than Liz Cheney has. So I just find it fascinating that while Trump lists all of these talking points about Liz Cheney that are not true at all, Elise Stefanik, the person who he's very supportive of to fill this leadership role, has actually gone against Trump policy-wise through her votes. And he doesn't care because he just wants someone who's going to loudly accept and loudly regurgitate what he has to say about the 2020 election. Now, the second part of his statement I think is fascinating because it goes to what I was saying earlier. He said, quote, she's a warmonger whose family stupidly pushed us into the never-ending Middle East disaster, draining our wealth and depleting our great military, the worst decision in our country's history. I look forward to soon watching her as a paid contributor on CNN or MSNBC. MSDNC, which is a talking point that's typically regurgitated by the Jimmy Dores of the world. Now, I want to make a point about how that statement is ridiculous when you take a look at Donald Trump's record on foreign policy. Donald Trump's record on foreign policy was garbage. He vetoed bipartisan efforts, a bipartisan resolution to get the United States out of Yemen. He vetoed that. Donald Trump ripped up the Iran nuclear deal, and obviously that increased tensions with Iran. We didn't need to be there. Iran is now doing exactly what the nuclear deal prevented them from doing, which is enriching uranium. He also implemented sanctions against the Iranian people, which has led to incredible pain and suffering among its civilians during the coronavirus pandemic. He's been a complete and utter disaster. Tried to cover up for Mohammed bin Salman after he ordered the murder and dismemberment of Jamal Khashoggi, a Washington Post journalist and US resident. So let's get that caveat out of the way because I acknowledge that Donald Trump's foreign policy was trash. But with that said, his comments about Liz Cheney ring true. She absolutely was in favor of the preemptive war in Iraq. She has created think tanks with the likes of Bill Kristol in order to manufacture consent for forever wars abroad. And you have to keep in mind that it's not just Democratic voters in this country who sent their children to fight those wars. It was also Republican voters who sent their children to fight those wars. And when those children came back, they were abandoned. They weren't given the health care they needed. They weren't given the mental health care they needed after suffering from PTSD and other mental health issues after dealing with multiple deployments to the Middle East. So as much as I can't stand Donald Trump, and while I completely acknowledge that he's a complete and utter liar, Liz Cheney has created this bed for herself and now she has to lay in it. Those kinds of statements ring true. And I think that it does have an impact on Republican voters and who they choose to support moving forward. I just wish that the same voters were a little more aware of how Donald Trump was a continuation of the same foreign policy that we experienced during the Bush era, during the Obama era, and now also during the Biden era. Doesn't matter what the administration is, our foreign policy in the last several decades has not changed. But when Liz Cheney tries to tell the truth, she needs to understand that she's already destroyed her credibility. And she's got to take responsibility for that as well. All right, well, let's move on to what some of these traditional Republicans plan to do now that they're absolutely outraged and disgusted with the outcome of this whole Liz Cheney situation. A group of more than 100 former GOP officials who have absolutely no power are writing a strongly worded letter to the GOP. That's what they're doing, strongly worded letter. And they're also threatening to do something that could be fascinating. They're threatening to form a new party to fight back against the party of Trump. Now, of course, this is in response to the House Republicans ousting Representative Liz Cheney from her leadership role because she refused to regurgitate Donald Trump's talking points on the 2020 election. Let me give you more details on who these people are and what they're planning on doing. A letter headlined "A Call for American Renewal" is an exploratory move toward forming a breakaway party, two of its organizers said. The group is dismayed by what it says is a modern Republican Party driven by its allegiance to Trump, who continues to falsely claim that the 2020 election was stolen from him. So forming a third party is fascinating, and I think I want to see how it plays out. I think this could actually be very positive, because one of my worries was that the Democratic Party was going to take on more and more of these Never Trump Republicans. And these Never Trump Republicans are Bush era Republicans who are awful. I don't think that the Trump administration and the terrible nature of that administration should launder the reputation of these Never Trump Republicans. The very people who love corporate deregulation, the people who love forever wars in the Middle East, the people who typically love to engage in fear-mongering and scare-mongering rhetoric in regard to China. These are the people who have absolutely no interest in bettering working conditions for Americans. They're not our friends. And we don't need them in the Republican Party. So the idea of them forming a third party, interesting, might be good. Let me give you more details. The letter signatories, who include former ambassadors, governors, congressional members, and cabinet secretaries, want the Republican Party to return to principled leadership and reject division and conspiracy theories, or face a new party dedicated to fighting for Republicans such as Cheney and against fear-mongering and lies. Miles Taylor, if you can remember, was a former Trump administration official, and he said that the Republican Party is broken. He stepped down from Trump's administration. It's time for a resistance of the rationals against the radicals. So he's referring to the current Republican Party, the party of Trump, as the radicals. And I should also note that none of the people backing this latest effort are currently serving in any position of power. They're not currently elected in any office. These are former Republican officials and politicians. Backers of the reform group include Republican governors Tom Ridge, Christine Todd, Whitman, George W. Bush era Transportation Secretary Mary Peters, and former House members Charlie Dent, Barbara Comstock, Reed Ribble, and Mickey Edwards. Look, these people have no power right now, like none. And Republican voters have no interest in what they have to say. However, I do think that it's a better option for the Democratic Party to have these Never Trumpers form whatever third party they want, knowing, by the way, that that third party has no shot. But even though it has no shot at winning, what's important to take away here is A, we're not gonna have to worry about them in the Democratic Party if they do in fact form this third party. And B, this is really a threat to the possibility of Trump winning the 2024 election should he choose to run and should he win the Republican primary, which I would venture to say he probably would win that primary. Because obviously all you need is just like a little slice of Republican voters to reject the Trump ticket and go for this traditional GOP branding that's being presented in this proposed third party. So will this maybe get some of these Republican lawmakers to question the direction they're going in? Maybe, but right now what they're doing is just listening to their constituents, and their constituents, unfortunately, overwhelmingly approved of the job that Donald Trump did. So backers of the reform group, I'm sorry, let me get to this NBC poll because it kind of gives you a sense of what I'm talking about here. Now, it's been several months since Trump has been in power. His numbers are declining a little bit. A recent NBC News poll found that 44% of Republicans said that they support Trump more than the GOP. So these are people who would follow Trump no matter where he goes. If he decides to form a third party, they would follow him. But Trump isn't gonna form a third party. Obviously, Trump is gonna remain in the Republican Party, and if he runs for 2024, he'll do it on the Republican ticket. But that's compared to 50% who said they support the GOP more than the former president. So things can change, and I think that it's important to keep that in mind. But as it stands today, I think that this threat coming from traditional Republicans, the never Trumpers, could be an interesting one for the current Republican Party because they can't stand to lose any votes. I mean, I imagine that it's gonna be a close election in 2024, and the possibility of a third Republican-like party basically taking some of those votes away might terrify them, might make them think a little differently about how they proceed. But we'll see how this all plays out. I think it's an interesting proposal, and the number one upside to it is it gives these never Trump Republican voters a home, a place to go. And luckily, it won't be the Democratic Party. All right, we gotta take a break. When we come back, we have more news for you guys, including gas shortages in 7 different states as a result of hackers stopping operations of one of the largest oil pipelines in the country. And we'll also talk about Jim Jordan and what he had to say about Liz Cheney and this whole debacle. Come right back. You're listening to Cool Jazz 95 FM. I need to be pumped up today, guys. I need to be pumped up. Anyway, Effectos writes in our members section and says, Republicans, I'm being canceled. Also Republicans, cancel Liz Cheney. Yeah, I mean, listen, most people who whine about cancel culture are full of it. Most of them are hypocritical. I think that there are actual legitimate critiques of cancel culture. And I try to come at it from a good faith perspective, but it's rare to find, to be honest. Let me also give you guys some programming notes. Like, what the hell? Am I not gonna tell you guys what's happening on the show? Bonus episode coming up today after the second hour. We used to call it the post game, not calling it post game anymore. We wanna call it the bonus episode because it is in fact a bonus that our members get. And if you're wondering like, what the hell, I want the bonus episode, how do I get access to it? You just need to click that join button if you're watching on YouTube, or you can go to tyt.com/join. Our members get all sorts of exclusive programming and other perks, so please check it out. We absolutely love, I love the bonus episode. There it is, look at that. They even put together a great video showing you guys how it all works. So just click that join button. $1.99 a month, that's one of the options. $4.99 a month, that's TYT Essentials. Don't you wanna be essential? So definitely check that out. Woznia, by the way, is killing it on our Twitch channel. And so tune into Woznia Tuesdays and Wednesdays at 10 p.m. Eastern time, 7 p.m. Pacific, and that's at twitch.tv/TYT. It's just a really fun show to watch, along with the other programming that we have on our Twitch channel that I love listening to and watching while I'm cooking. because I like to laugh. Happy Half Hour is another great show, so make sure you check that out. That's hosted on Wednesdays after our bonus show by Brett Ehrlich, who is a jack of all trades. He basically does work for everything that you see on this network. It's incredible. Anyway, more comments. Let's go to the mathematician who says, Anna, ask yourself something. Why is it that only right-wingers are allowed to form a third party in America? And if AOC and the squad tried to do such a thing, they'd be attacked like they bombed the White House and in all likelihood lose their careers. Because a third party will lose. A third party will, and the Never Trump Republicans forming this third party know that the party is gonna lose. The whole point is to threaten the Republican Party by taking some of their necessary votes away in a close presidential election. That's what they're doing. They know they're gonna lose. Our system is intentionally set up to ensure that a third party can't win. We had a conversation about that on Jacobin. You should check it out. All right, let's get back to the show.
You're messing with my Zen thing, man.
I do have to read one comment from our member, Ocam's Taser, because I found it funny. I wish I could just boo my coworkers when I disagreed with them and then be able to spin my behavior as patriotic. I also wish I could just walk out on work meetings with no excuse. Yeah, I mean, I feel the same way about this, clearly, the whole Liz Cheney situation, but I also felt that way when Biden responded to calls for policy by saying, you know what, I'm gonna form a commission to study whether we should pass a policy on gun violence. Okay, so now I say that to Cenk every time he gives me a new task to do at work. I'll be like, I got it, definitely. Let me just form this commission to study the task that you're talking about, and then I'll determine and decide whether or not I actually execute that task. Anyway, let's move on to our next story. And I encourage you guys to share this because every time Jim Jordan thinks that his opinion matters, anytime he wants to say something combative, anytime he wants to lie, I see it as an opportunity to bring up the fact that he has been accused of covering up sexual abuse. So share this video. I definitely recommend you do that. Representative Jim Jordan, a Trump loyalist and a man who seems to have a knack for covering up sexual abuse allegations allegedly, has decided to throw stones at Liz Cheney for refusing to lie to the American people about the 2020 election. She has refused to regurgitate Donald Trump's talking points about how the election was stolen from him, something that he had no evidence of. Now, let's hear Jim Jordan's exchange with Laura Ingraham about Liz Cheney and why she was ousted from Republican leadership.
Now, how is anything she's saying different from any garden variety left-wing pundit on MSNBC? I mean, they're literally citing her every morning on MSNBC and talk about her plight and how courageous she is. Like, if Republicans are getting praised by that crowd, isn't that kind of an obvious, well, that's not the person you want leading the party?
No, and this is not new. This happened on January 13th when the Democrats went with their impeachment. I was the guy charged with managing our time on the Republican side, and all we heard was Steny Hoyer and other Democrats reciting statements that Congresswoman Cheney had made. That this has been a pattern, and I think frankly now there's just enough of our conference who've said we got to make a change, and it's going to happen tomorrow morning.
Again, we tried to warn them and they didn't listen.
We tried to warn them and they didn't listen. She's like the most unbearable, insufferable person on Fox. I know that there's a long list of people who fall under that category, but there's something about Laura Ingraham that, anyway. So Jim Jordan knows that Liz Cheney has voted along with Trump. She is a committed conservative vote on the policies, on the any issue that Republicans want to get passed. Liz Cheney has been on board. In fact, she has voted along with Donald Trump far more often than Elise Stefanik, who is now going to take Liz Cheney's role in the leadership position that Cheney was ousted from. And what's amazing here is what we're hearing from the Republican Party, this is important, is that even when they know the truth, even when they know right from wrong, they are going to do whatever is necessary to push back against Biden. That is their number one priority. That's all they care about. So even if Biden does something good, something that they typically would agree with, they're going to pretend they disagree and they're going to push back against it because their whole purpose, even if it hurts their own constituents, is to push back against Biden. So I say that because every time we hear from Senator Joe Manchin about the importance of working with the Republican Party, understand that they have no interest in doing that at all. They don't care. They don't care about how effective the infrastructure policies would be in improving the lives of Republican constituents in their states. They don't care about whether those very policies are policies that they themselves would want to champion if they were in the position of power that Biden's in. Their whole point is to push back against Joe Biden no matter what, and that includes perpetuating a lie that the election was stolen from Donald Trump. So I'm not interested in hearing Joe Manchin's stupid lies, because that's what they are in effect, lies about the importance of bipartisanship and reaching across the aisle and working together. They don't want to work with Democrats. They've made that abundantly clear, and Joe Manchin is just using that as cover for the fact that he wants to do right by his corporate donors. So that's part number one of this story. Part number two is this. Since Jim Jordan felt the need to remind me about his existence by doing that interview, I feel the need to repeat a story that we've already covered, but every time that Jim Jordan wants to do a media appearance, I'm gonna repeat the story. We're gonna cover it every single time that Jim Jordan goes out there in the media to get a little attention for himself and to lie. Jim Jordan certainly has some cojones to go on national television and accuse Liz Cheney of anything when he himself has faced some very serious allegations of covering up sexual assault and sexual abuse allegations at Ohio State University. This is a story that's been developing for years now. Jim Jordan accused of begging former Ohio State wrestler not to support reports of sexual abuse. We should watch a quick report on that just to remember what that abuse was.
Ohio State announced it was investigating abuse allegations against a man by the name of Dr. Richard Strauss for allegedly abusing students from the mid-1970s to the mid-late 1990s. One former wrestler telling CNN Dr. Strauss touched him inappropriately starting when he was a teenager. He says Strauss sexually molested some of his other teammates as well. That wrestler, Michael DiSabato, says it was common knowledge among team members about this doctor and about what he would allegedly do during examinations. DiSabato says he and other wrestlers spoke openly about it, openly about inappropriate touching, and he says staff, including Jim Jordan, who was a wrestling coach at the time, he says knew about what the doctor was allegedly doing.
So Jim Jordan was apparently approached by several athletes about this sexual abuse. The perpetrator, Richard Strauss, is no longer alive, so he's not gonna face the criminal consequences that he deserves to face. However, if Jim Jordan did in fact know about this abuse and went out of his way to cover it up, he should certainly suffer the consequences of that. I mean, people forget to even mention it. I mean, imagine inviting this guy on your show to opine on anything as he's facing this investigation. Now, of course, Jim Jordan completely denies it. However, there's already been some fascinating testimony from the brother of Mike DiSabato. His name is Adam DiSabato. And Mike DiSabato was the whistleblower who exposed the abuse by Richard Strauss. He testified, by the way, Wednesday during, this is an old report, so not Wednesday of this week, but earlier, during a public hearing in the state legislature, that when the story came out in July of 2018, he received a tearful phone call from Jim Jordan. What was that phone call about? Well, why don't we take a little listen to Adam DiSabato.
Jim Jordan called me crying. groveling on the 4th of July, begging me to go against my brother. Begging me. Crying for a half hour. That's the kind of cover-ups that's going on there. Jim Jordan called me several times after that. That week, I had to have my lawyer call him, tell him to stop calling me. I had a teammate, George Pardos, I called and told him, call Jim Jordan and tell him to quit calling me or I'm gonna beat his ass. He's throwing us under the bus, all of us. He's a coward. He's a coward. He's not a leader. He's a coward.
He certainly is a coward because as much as I despise Jim Jordan, I will give him enough credit to acknowledge that he knows what the truth is regarding the 2020 election. But he's too afraid. He doesn't have the courage to do what Liz Cheney did, which in my opinion is not that difficult. Tell the truth about the 2020 election. He's terrified of Donald Trump. He's terrified of Trump supporters, and he would rather squander and destroy our democratic process, our democracy, freedom, all of the things that Republicans claim to care so much about. He would rather destroy all of that in order to be the coward he is and go along with Donald Trump's talking points and lies about the 2020 election. That's who Jim Jordan is. He's also the type of guy, according to multiple allegations now, who will help cover up the abuse perpetrated by a sexual predator. And Fox News will invite him on so he can share his perspective and his point of view, his cowardly, disgusting perspective on Liz Cheney in the 2020 election. An Ohio State independent investigation into the abuse did not make conclusive determinations about whether particular employees knew about the abuse by Strauss, but this is important, but a report issued in May said coaches did know. It said Strauss, who killed himself in 2005, sexually abused at least 177 male students from 1979 to 1996. And if Jim Jordan did call Adam DiSabato and begged him to stop talking about it, begged him to change his story, pretty sure those phone records exist. So we'll find out eventually what Jim Jordan really knew, what he didn't know, how he engaged in this controversy. What I do know for sure, though, is that Jim Jordan is a complete and utter coward and an embarrassment to this country. We gotta take a break. When we come back, we'll discuss the gas shortages in several states, all because a private company decided that they didn't want to spend any money on cybersecurity. Deregulation, delicious. We'll be right back. Hey everyone, welcome to our social break. I'm gonna read some super chat comments. Ruthless Dragon says, Solo Anna is fire, thank you. I really appreciate it, especially because today was just, it's really hard to produce what's happening in Israel right now, and you gotta make sure that you keep up with all of the updates. And so I had very little time to actually reflect on what I wanted to say about these stories. So I'm glad that you guys are enjoying the show because I was nervous about it today, but I'm glad you're enjoying it. The Bernie Bro says, or that Bernie Bro says, do you think that every presidential election, if Republicans don't win, they'll pull the fraud card now? Is that the route we're going? Yeah, I think so. I think this is just gonna be a continuous effort by, and the thing that I keep thinking back on, because I can't help it, is how Republicans claimed that Hillary Clinton and the Democrats wouldn't accept the results of the 2016 election, when in fact they did. Hillary Clinton went to the woods. She disappeared for a while, which I wish she would go back there, to be honest. But remember that they made that video of our reaction to Trump winning go viral. We had a meltdown, they said. We had a meltdown. We had a meltdown. Okay. Alexander Linder, regarding communist propaganda, Cheney refers to the propaganda in China and Russia about the failing US democracy. Of course, neither of them are communist. Yeah, thank you. China is kicking our ass economically because we agreed to free trade deals and we shipped our jobs to China. To say that China is a communist country, I think, really, it just displays the complete lack of understanding or knowledge about how these various systems of government work. Peter Hamby says, I'd like to see how this will cause more GOP on GOP infighting. It's impossible to see a tripartisanship, especially McConnell's order to fail Biden. Yeah, Republicans have no interest in doing the right thing. It's amazing. Like every lawmaker who's going along with Donald Trump right now is just going in this short-sighted route of personal gain, personal enrichment. What can I do in the short term for my own political career? Not at all thinking about the importance of doing the right thing to maintain our democratic process. They have no interest in uniting Americans. Are you kidding me right now? Even if there was no dispute over the election, they would still do the same obstruction to Biden that they did under the Obama administration, which is why it's so infuriating to hear any Democrat talk about the importance of reaching across the aisle and working together in a bipartisan fashion. They don't like you, they're not gonna work with you. All right, 10 more seconds. I'll read one more comment from Quelly Walker. They got Liz back for the moron. Now he won't tell that they all participated in insider trading. We all know. Welcome back to TYT. Thank you so much for watching, and I encourage you to like and share this stream. We want to get as many live viewers as possible. And if you're watching live, you can leave us a super chat comment, which I'll read during our social breaks. That's for everyone viewing online right now. With that said, let's move on to our next story about gas shortages, which Americans in several states are unfortunately having to deal with right now. The East Coast is already feeling the immediate effects of the Colonial Pipeline shutdown following a ransomware attack by hackers. Many are actually right now trying to panic buy gas. Some are even hoarding gasoline out of fear that they won't have access to it very soon. And unfortunately, that's leading to a situation where others who haven't been able to purchase gas yet are coming across pumps that are out. And so if you live in Tennessee, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Alabama, Florida, and Georgia, it's likely you're experiencing this firsthand, and it's absolutely devastating. For their role, Colonial Pipeline is planning on getting back up and operating again within the week, although that was a very vague timeline, and we don't really have any certainty about when this pipeline, which is one of the country's largest, will be functioning again. Now, one woman in South Carolina, a resident, said, it was unbelievable. When I was driving today, I thought it was a catastrophe coming. I've seen all these cars waiting and I was like, oh my God, I have to fill my tank up. And so the Biden administration is trying to urge people to not panic buy and to avoid hoarding gas. But of course, people aren't really listening because the panic has already set in. The 5,500-mile pipeline delivers roughly 45% of the fuels used on the East Coast. So with that in mind, you can understand why this is such a devastating cyber attack. And if you're curious about how this happened, you can check out our initial video on this. When the story first broke, we gave you all the details on that. But as I mentioned, the Biden administration is now saying, please stop hoarding the gas. The US Energy Secretary urged motorists not to panic buy fuel. Instead, officials are considering moving supply by train or ship if necessary. Also, just to give you a sense of how much this is impacting states in the South was in fact hit the hardest. Late Monday, almost 6.5% of gas stations in Virginia were out of fuel, according to travel app GasBuddy. It said more than 1% of stations in North Carolina and Florida had no gas. And remember, that was on Monday. We're now dealing with the same situation on Wednesday, so it's very likely that people are experiencing, a lack of gas at stations in these particular states. Governors from North Carolina, Georgia, and Virginia have declared a state of emergency. North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper suspended some regulations to make sure the state has enough fuel. Meanwhile, Georgia Governor Brian Kemp suspended the gas tax. So I want to go to this video that kind of gives you a sense of how people are feeling on the ground in these states, what they're experiencing, and just how catastrophic this incident really is. And then we'll talk about why this happened. Take a look.
We got a call from family that said you better fuel up before you hit Tennessee.
The Secretary of Energy urged people not to panic buy fuel and said they are considering moving supply by train or ship if necessary.
We're asking people not to hoard and know that we are all over this.
The ransomware attack on Colonial Pipeline, carried out by the Russian criminal hacking group DarkSide, is having the kind of impact many analysts predicted.
This is a massive pipeline, and without it, we're quickly realizing what can happen. Fuel is starting to run out.
The 5,500-mile pipeline supplies 40% of the East Coast fuel. Shortages are now being reported in 7 states, including Georgia, where the governor suspended the gasoline tax.
It'll probably help level the price at the pump off for a little while.
Airlines are also feeling it. American forced to add refueling stops for 2 of its long-haul flights. And while Colonial Pipeline says that it expects to be up and running by the end of the week, the Biden administration is under pressure to make sure it doesn't happen again.
But this is a stark example of how these cyber attacks can have real demonstrable impacts on our economy and our national security.
Oh, it's fascinating to hear a Republican lawmaker talk about these cyber attacks and how threatening they are to our national security, to our economy. I agree. The only problem is, for those who want Biden to do something, what exactly are they expecting him to do? Are they expecting regulation? Because the fact of the matter is, Colonial Pipeline is a privately held company. It's privately held by some foreign actors, certainly the Koch brothers. And so are we calling on regulating this private company to ensure that they're actually spending the necessary resources to bulk up their cybersecurity? Because a private company has one goal and one goal only, and that's to maximize their profits and to lower their costs. So are they going to take necessary actions to prevent something that could happen in the future? Or are they gonna save that money in order to return more to their shareholders, to beef up their executive pay? That's the question we need to be asking right now. Because again, a Republican lawmaker in that video specifically said, this is serious, this is very serious, but this is a private company. So let's talk about what we've experienced historically with private companies and their unwillingness to spend the necessary resources to bulk up their security, certainly their cybersecurity. There was an interesting article written years ago in Issues in Science and Technology that I think perfectly applies to what we're experiencing today. Businesses have not displayed a strong commitment to cybersecurity, to put it mildly. Many corporate leaders and the think tanks they're associated with, the corporate world, maintain one version or another of a libertarian or conservative laissez-faire approach, basically holding that they are the best, or they are best left alone, not regulated, free to follow their own courses. They further hold that their main duty is to their shareholders who own the corporations and not to the common good. That's how private companies operate, folks. So when you have a pipeline that provides fuel to 45% of people in the East Coast, or 45% of the fuel to the East Coast, I should say, obviously that's an important pipeline, right? Obviously that's a pipeline that you'd want to secure. But if you've got a private company, the only way you can ensure that they take the appropriate measures is if you regulate them. And there's no conversation about that. This is not a government entity. This is a private corporation. They want to maximize profits. They're not going to do the right thing out of the goodness of their hearts. There's no morality here. Morality doesn't weigh in to their decisions here. Profits do. Which is why these types of situations happen all the time. We just experienced it in Texas with their privatized electric grid. Well, let me give you more. The effects of industrial espionage are often not in evidence for several years, beyond the horizons of many CEOs who are concerned primarily with the short-term profits and stock prices of their corporations. I need you guys to understand this. This is how it works. This is how the system works. It's not broken. This is how the system works. They're not going to take the appropriate measures to protect themselves from any hacker, from any ransomware. They're not gonna do it because that would require them to invest in the company. And the only investment that we've been seeing from private corporations lately is in the form of corporate stock buybacks to further enrich themselves and increase their profits through artificially inflating the price of their stock. That's what they do. That's their way of investing in their companies. Let me give you more. Governments that seek to address private sector cyber vulnerabilities face serious pushback against onerous regulations and reservations about creating a moral hazard if they assume responsibility for protecting the private sector. These reasons and others have made a government solution to this worsening private sector predicament unsatisfactory, a situation that is unlikely to fundamentally change for the foreseeable future. Buckle up, folks. Buckle up. There's gonna be more and more of this. And so, has there been an example of the federal government using regulation as an effective tool to protect people? Yeah. In fact, when it comes to credit cards, something really fascinating happened in the 1970s that I'd love to share with you. The credit card system is often cited as an example where incentives are correctly aligned, dating from the 1970s when the government placed limitations on consumer liability for fraudulent charges. This change in liability motivated the industry to develop needed security measures. So once you shift the costs from the consumers, from ordinary Americans, to the corporate executives, then all of a sudden it looks like they have an incentive. Oh, maybe we need to beef up our security to prevent fraud. Because previously, before this, if you were the victim of fraud as an ordinary American, then you gotta deal with it. But once there were regulations indicating that the credit card issuer would have to deal with it, well, they have an incentive to beef up their security. They want to prevent fraud because they don't want to have to pay. What we're experiencing right now is not the bug, it is the feature. This is how it works. And we got to be real about that. When it comes to certain parts of society that we need for security, for safety, for sustenance, for shelter, for healthcare, all of those things that are so important to our survival, we really have to question, does it make sense for these services, for these things to be provided to us by private corporations that have one goal and one goal only, maximize profits? So while Republicans claim that this is awful, we gotta do something about this, I think we need to ask that follow-up question. Okay, great, what do you propose we do? Do you propose that the federal government take public resources and just shift it over to private companies so they don't have to pay for security, so the US taxpayer pays for security on their behalf? Because if that's what they're proposing, they can go ahead and F off. But if they're proposing regulation, then I'm interested in having a conversation. Then we should maybe take a little listen to what they have to say. But my guess is they're not interested in that. Final story for you guys. Corporate stock buybacks are back. Fun. Private companies are currently asking the Biden administration to prematurely end the federally subsidized unemployment benefits of $300 a week to Americans who were laid off during the pandemic. They're worried. They want people to get back to work. They're having a difficult time enticing their employees to get back to work. And while these companies refuse to maybe increase their wages, so workers aren't, persuaded by a measly $300 a week to stay at home, they've decided, no, we're gonna do this by force. We're gonna try to get the government to cut Americans off, but we're not going to increase wages. In fact, corporations have decided we're gonna take the money we do have, the money that could afford us higher wages, and we're just gonna buy shares of our own stock. What we usually do. So let me give you those details. The Financial Times reported that in what its analysts dubbed a buyback bonanza, Goldman projected shares repurchases by US companies would increase 35% this year from 2020. In fact, they've spent a considerable amount of money buying shares of their own stock already. US companies announced $484 billion in share buybacks in the first 4 months of this year, the highest such total in at least 2 decades, according to Goldman Sachs. So they can't afford to pay their workers a living wage. They won't even agree to pay their workers just a little more than $300 a week to get them back to work. But they will buy shares of their own stock. So let's take a look at this fun graph that the Financial Times put together, which shows you just how much corporate stock buybacks have increased in recent years. So you'll see, starting in 2000, you have some corporate stock buybacks. Number goes down significantly in 2009 for obvious reasons. We have an economic collapse. Funny, in 2020, when these companies were being bailed out by the Federal Reserve, they were doing corporate stock buybacks. Fascinating, really interesting stuff there. And then you look at 2021 and the graph just skyrockets to already nearly $500 billion. And it's frustrating because places like CNBC will just go ahead and share the corporate perspective on this. They won't talk about how wages have remained stagnant, how that is a problem in discouraging people to go back to work. They won't talk about that. They might address it, but immediately use the same talking points we hear from the US Chamber of Commerce, probably one of the worst groups in this country, especially when it comes to the well-being of American workers. Let's take a quick look at how CNBC covered this story.
I spoke with Neil Bradley. He's the executive vice president of the Chamber of Commerce just a couple of minutes ago, and he said that this unemployment benefit, it might have been the right time last year to do that, but now the time has passed. They're calling for an end to this supplemental $300 a week in payments to workers, saying there's simply a worker shortage in this country. But I asked him though, isn't there a wage shortage? If you're struggling to get people to come out to work, isn't that more about wages than it is about workers? Here's what he said.
Wages were a bright spot in this jobs report, right? So, wages were up about 0.7% here. So employers are responding. But remember, now employers are having to compete not just with each other for workers, they're competing with the government, who is paying people more not to work than they made working.
What kind of garbage argument was that? No, wages are doing great, guys. Wages are so good. They've increased 0.7%, which, by the way, he's full of it because he immediately follows that with, but now we got to compete with the US government that's paying Americans a whopping $300 a week. $300 a week, how can we compete with that? We have to have some money left over to do corporate stock buybacks. I mean, we gotta pay ourselves, guys. That's what this is about. He's so ridiculous. It's ridiculous. It's so ridiculous to even play that shot, to play that video as if what he's saying is in any way legitimate. It's not. It's not. Jamie Dimon, chief executive of JP Morgan Chase, whose board gave the green light to a $30 billion buyback program in December, said last month his bank was buying back stock because our cup runneth over. Oh, that's fascinating. Is that what you told the Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell, when you were taking printed money from the Federal Reserve, when you needed to be bailed out by the Federal Reserve, when you needed insanely low interest rates from the Federal Reserve? Is that what Jamie Dimon had to say? Our cup runneth over? Let me give you more. Keep in mind, I want you guys to understand how all of this works, because while Americans were debating over scraps for ordinary people who had been laid off from their jobs, while members of Congress were like, I don't know, should it be $400 or should it be $300 a week? We don't know, we can't decide. While that was going on, the Federal Reserve, under the leadership of Jerome Powell, lowered interest rates to near zero and also printed money for these companies and these banks because they needed liquidity, guys. They needed liquidity. We didn't need liquidity. No one in this office needed liquidity. None of those tens of millions of laid off workers needed liquidity. It was JP Morgan, guys. They needed liquidity, not us. And what that refers to is quantitative easing. Nomi Prinz, who I greatly admire, wrote a fantastic book about this called Collusion. It's about how central banks manipulate the market. And this is how it works. Quantitative easing, also known as large-scale asset purchases, typically involves a central bank, like the US Federal Reserve, itself purchasing government bonds or long-term securities in order to add liquidity back into the market. The Fed announced that it would commence the quantitative easing program with an immediate $80 billion buy, but would purchase at least $700 billion in assets over the coming months with no limit. And that's exactly what they did. In fact, the Federal Reserve's balance sheet ballooned following their March 15th, 2020 announcement to carry out quantitative easing to increase the liquidity of US banks. It reached $7.81 trillion as of May 5th, 2021. This measure was taken to increase the money supply and stimulate economic growth in the wake of the damage caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. How you guys feeling? You feeling that economic growth? Because what these banks ended up doing was making it incredibly difficult to borrow. You think that they actually loaned money out to chumps like us? I mean, that's the whole argument behind creating liquidity, right? So you want to make sure the economy is moving along. But these banks clearly had no interest in loaning the money to people who needed it to stay afloat. We're sitting around waiting for our feckless loser lawmakers to carry out our best interests when in fact all they did was nickel and dime the American people. And there was no discussion, no debate about the Federal Reserve implementing quantitative easing. There was no debate about them printing money. There was no debate about them lowering interest rates in order to make it easier for these businesses, these massive corporations who do not pay a living wage in many cases to their workers, to essentially enrich themselves further. And so now they got a little bit of cash and they've already announced that they plan on doing record corporate stock buybacks, the same thing they did with their windfall from Trump's tax cuts for the rich and corporations. But guess what? As I've said before, I'll say it again. This is not the bug, it is the feature. When we come back from the break, John Iadarola will be joining me for an update on what's happening in Jerusalem and the Gaza Strip.
You're about to watch some behind the scenes footage of the Young Turks. Ooh. Now these are partial videos. If you want to get all of them, you become a member, go to tyt.com/join, and you'll get all the behind the scenes of me, Anna, John, JR, a little bit reality show like tyt.com/join, and enjoy this.
You know what you're seeing behind me? Jersey, hold,
Watch me flip this camera. However I flip it. Do I flip it like this? No, I just took a picture. I'm bitzing right now.
What?
Behind the scenes.
Oh, okay. For members? I don't have my face on.
She doesn't have her face on, folks. Oh, that's JR's ass right there.
You can't take 5 minutes off, can you?
No, I can't, Johnny Pie. I said it was live stream, but I was lying. It's not a live stream. It's just for members. Bitsy, this is my cat. You know what his name is? Kiki Cat.
Animals are innocent.
Control room and the insanity is obviously there.
Right now, as you can see, I'm directing or tech directing.
I'm so happy to be here. This is what like a Labor Day beard looks like for Cenk. Man, you're a Young Turks viewer if you recognize me like this.
Oh, thank you. You are the one person in my life I would love to meet.
What's going on, guys? This is a Bitsy or a BTS or behind the scenes with Hassan Piker, aka Woke Bay.
Oh, hi, I didn't see you there.
I have finished my show, The Damage Report, and now I get into a really awkward time of the day.
When I'm sitting, the control room is right there. So I can see Bart.
This is the Pittsburgh office, by the way. I'll refer to often as the boiler room.
You see how it's ripped? Is it super unprofessional to wear that at a business meeting? Or am I like cool rebel?
I just finished doing the power panel and I'm fired up.
What do you do for TYT?
Not a whole lot.
If you're frantically tweeting at us that something's broken, thank you, because I'm fixing it.
And thank you for being a TYT member.
Super last thing, because there's always got to be a super last thing. Oh, that was disastrous. This has been behind the scenes, behind the scenes.
Hi, this is Tim Frisch, Director of Post-Production and Graphics at the Young Turks. As you know, the whole world is social distancing right now, and that includes marijuana.
Where you going, marijuana? He's okay.
Looks like a pretty happy guy, all things considered.
My dad wrote the story of his life. It's called Original Young Turk. It's a book on shoptyt.com. Part of the story is how I became progressive. Now, he doesn't write about that per se, but in his life story, you see, oh my God, when a community helps one another, when the government also chips in and gives you free education, anything is possible. He went from an incredibly poor olive farmer to living the American dream.
When news is breaking and when you need Brett Ehrlich, it's time. When news breaks, when news is breaking and you like, when news is breaking and you need Brett Ehrlich, it's time for Breaking News with Brett Ehrlich. This is Breaking News with Brett Ehrlich.
Climate is changing fundamentally, extremely, and non-linearly. It's becoming worse now. It's not when the levees burst that is the problem. It's in the anticipation of that.
So I hope every human being is safe. And by human beings, I do not include multinational corporations, especially the ones that started climate change in the first place.
What we're currently doing right now in cutting emissions is clearly not enough. There will be ramifications to what Trump is doing. I don't want people to suffer, but I feel like there's gonna be a lot of suffering because we have an imbecile as our leader. On the ones and twos, he took my request, played some EDM music for me, which I love. John Idarola is in the seat next to me.
Yep, he's the true Instagram DJ, I think.
Wait, what was the Instagram DJ story again?
Leslie Jones made fun of me.
Oh, that's right, that's right. Let's talk about that a little bit. We have some fun stories to get to in the post game, but I want to talk about that as well. I think it's a fun story as well. Okay, well, Listen, this next story is difficult to cover for obvious reasons. So I know I'm in like a great peppy mood now because my good friend is here to do the news with me. But now we got to tone it down because the situation in Israel just continues to devolve and it's just absolutely horrific. Let's talk about it. The United Nations has warned of a full-scale war in Israel and Gaza as the death toll from airstrikes rapidly increases. In fact, the United Nations Special Coordinator for the Middle East peace process tweeted the following: "Stop the fire immediately. We're escalating toward a full-scale war. Leaders on all sides have to take responsibility of de-escalation." Part of that I disagree with, to be honest. The cost of war in Gaza is devastating and is being paid by ordinary people. UN is working with all sides to restore calm. Stop the violence now. Now, while there are certainly calls for both sides to stop using any type of violence, the fact of the matter is Hamas has agreed to a truce if Israel agrees to stop using airstrikes against the people of Gaza. Clearly they have not stopped doing that, and Benjamin Netanyahu has not agreed to a truce. So that's important context to the story that I think is missing from a lot of these reports. The Biden administration also tried to block a UN Security Council statement demanding de-escalation, and I think that's relevant to this story. Before a further upsurge of violence, the 15-member Security Council began discussions on a draft statement that would express concern about the clashes and the potential evictions, call on Israel to cease Jewish settlement activities, demolitions and evictions, and urge general restraint. Now, that doesn't seem controversial to me at all, but apparently it does for the Biden administration. Such statements have to be agreed by consensus, but diplomats said the United States, a close ally of Israel, told council counterparts that the body would not issue a statement at the moment. And then finally, speaking on condition of anonymity, the source said Washington is, quote, actively engaged in diplomacy behind the scenes with all parties to achieve a ceasefire, and was concerned that a council statement might be counterproductive at the moment. John.
Well, counterproductive to certain goals, not necessarily the common sense ones that would come out of this, like people not dying anymore. But that is the most important goal for people like me, probably people like Anna, some others. It's not the most important for most people in Washington. It's clearly not the most important for Joe Biden or his administration. And it's gotta be reassuring for Americans who've obviously been through a lot politically for the past few years. Things have been so chaotic, and you might have thought that switching over from Donald Trump to Joe Biden was just gonna mean that everything changes. But not everything. Some things, like the US's stance on Israel and their right to self-defense, and boy, is each of those words pulling a lot of weight, hasn't really changed. It didn't change from Trump to Biden. Although, I don't even know if Biden really criticized the movement of the embassy, but a lot of Democrats were like, well, come on, this is too incendiary. We'd prefer to just allow all the settlements to continue forever. That's a little bit more low key. Because remember, Obama wasn't great on these issues. He came into office saying he was going to push back against some of the provocations, and he chose not to do that once he was president. That was pretty much what Trump was like. And it looks like that's what Biden is gonna be like. So some things really don't change. I'm often critical of the people who try to imply that there's no difference between the parties, because I think that that's lazy thinking. But there are some issues where it is difficult to find those differences.
I agree with you full-heartedly, especially when it comes to foreign policy, because we've seen a continuation of the same foreign policy, regardless of which administration is in charge, which political party is in charge. Obama was a continuation of Bush-era foreign policy, in fact, an expansion of Bush-era foreign policy. Donald Trump continued that with an expansion of drone strikes and signature strikes, US involvement in Yemen, weapons sales in India and Japan. And now we're experiencing much of the same when it comes to the conflict in Israel and conflicts all over the globe. I mean, just our current involvement in Yemen, it still exists, and we haven't really seen much of a change. Now, also the idea that the Biden administration would come in and tell the UN Security Council, please don't issue a statement calling on de-escalation. I mean, it just tells you everything you need to do. Biden apparently had a conversation with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and issued a very vague statement about how I think things are gonna calm down now, when there's really no indication that that's happening or that's the case. And in fact, the death toll has continued to rise. I hesitate to even tell you the exact numbers because by the time you watch this video, it's very likely that the numbers will be much higher. But it's literally dozens of people on the Palestinian side and about, at this moment, as we do this video, about 6 people on the Israeli side. On the Palestinian side, the reason why you have dozens of people dead is because when Israel does airstrikes in Gaza, they hit their targets. They don't have the Iron Dome. They don't have the same military capability. They don't have the same protection that Israel does. And I'm glad that Israel does. But to treat this as if it's this equal situation, as if this is some sort of fair conflict with both sides holding the same military might, the same power, the same capability is a complete and utter lie. And I'm tired of people presenting it that way. It is not the case. And it's also important to understand who the aggressors were in the first place. Benjamin Netanyahu decided to engage aggressively against Arabs in Israel and of course against Palestinians in Gaza. And we have evidence of that. This is a conflict that at the moment was actually pretty dormant. Obviously it's an ongoing conflict, I'm not taking away from that. But things seemed pretty peaceful lately until Netanyahu decided to take a few actions. We'll remind you of what those actions are in just a second. But before we do, I want to get to this video of the Al-Sharuk Tower, which was targeted in an airstrike. This is a tower which provided office space for several media, including international organizations. In central Gaza City, being leveled by Israeli warplanes, the latest tower block to be destroyed. In fact, just yesterday, we shared a video of a 13-story residential building that was also bombed by Israeli forces. The residents of that building were given just 1 hour to evacuate. But while some of them might have been able to save their lives, they certainly weren't able to save their homes. Where are they gonna go now? And here is the Al-Sharuk Tower that was bombed just today. There it is. So we're gonna pretend as if the military capability and the defense capability of the Israeli side is equal to that of the Palestinians. That's what we're gonna pretend, right?
Yep.
Except no, we're not gonna pretend that that's the case here. We're gonna tell you the truth without fear. We're not gonna walk on eggshells. The facts are the facts. And to pretend as if both sides are equal here is absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah.
I think the death toll bears that out.
Yeah, do you think, so obviously we've been watching this for days and our initial fears that the violence would get even worse and more would die and as always, it'll be 90% Palestinians who will die have been coming true. But obviously, we were talking about how we've been doing this for years and years, and obviously one of the tragic things about this is that it's so cyclical that you see these same sorts of things happening with the same lack of leadership from the United States or from the UN in large part because of the United States. Do you feel like, at least in terms of the way the media has addressed it, that it's a little bit better? I mean, CNN had an actual Palestinian reporting from Palestine that was then.
Are they not merciful?
I know, well, they wouldn't do that before,
right? No,
really.
You're right.
And the vast majority of the statements from politicians, especially in Democratic leadership, are absolute garbage. Just terrible. Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell's statements, you could just jumble them up and hand one to each and it wouldn't really make any difference. So that's the same, but you do have people like Ilhan Omar, and you have Rashida Tlaib, and you have AOC, and you have Ayanna Pressley, and you have a lot of others who are speaking out with a lot of empathy and compassion and understanding of the historical situation. I feel like it's at least a little bit better, not in terms of the leadership, but the media and some politicians. There seems to be international pressure that maybe America will be able to kneecap, but maybe that's a good sign?
I think that is a good sign. In fact, Mehdi Hassan did a great interview with Rashida Tlaib on this, and I recommend you guys check that out. He's working for Peacock. It's part of NBC. So to your point, we're finally starting to, at least in the US media, get a a different perspective that was largely ignored in previous conflicts, right? When these tensions would flare, when we would see this type of violence previously. And I'm not gonna lie, I mean, even I would have fear about talking about it honestly, openly. I felt like I had to walk on eggshells because the second you say anything that's even remotely critical of Israel's government, they're very effective in painting you as some sort of anti-Semite, when in reality, I think the worst thing you can do for the people of Israel, Jewish people in Israel, is needlessly engage in this type of violence because you're worried about your political career. And that's exactly what Benjamin Netanyahu is doing here. He's facing serious criminal corruption charges. He's failed to form a government. He's a complete and utter disaster. So this is what authoritarian leaders, including authoritarian leaders in the United States, do in order to remain in power, in order to garner support among constituents. They needlessly start conflicts, they scare their own people, and their people are somehow persuaded that these warmongers and these incredibly violent authoritarians are best suited to protect them during a time of conflict. That's what's happening here. And with that said, I want to remind you all how this started to begin with. Because again, this was largely a dormant conflict. And all of a sudden, about a month ago, something changed, and it was because of what Benjamin Netanyahu decided to do. I'm gonna go to video F3. Let's go to video F3 and watch.
This all began almost a month ago when especially young Palestinians were angered by Israeli limits on Ramadan gatherings.
Now, since the beginning of Ramadan, they have escalated to the point of absolute provocation for Palestinians everywhere.
Adding fuel to the fire is the planned eviction of several Palestinian families from homes in East Jerusalem that the Israeli courts have ruled belong to Jews.
Why did that have to happen? Why, out of nowhere, did Netanyahu decide to do this? And of course, there are the multiple raids of the Al-Aqsa Mosque. People who are practicing their religion being met with violence and brutality by Israeli forces. What was the point of that? What was the point of that? And then when you have a discussion about what's actually happening on the ground, if you have the audacity to say that Palestinians have the right to defend themselves, you're a terrible person. You don't believe in Israel's right to exist somehow, which is absolutely ridiculous. No, I believe that everyone in that region deserves a life of peace and a life of dignity. That includes Israelis and Palestinians. But that's not what we're seeing on the ground right now. And innocent Israelis are dying as a result of what Benjamin Netanyahu is doing. That's the fact. Like, that's what's really happening on the ground there. Anyone who tells you otherwise is lying to you. Anyone who acts like both sides are equal, lying to you. We're talking about the occupied versus the occupiers. We're talking about someone with military might, a side with military might, and a side that has literally nothing, okay? Yes, Hamas is retaliating with rocket strikes. That's absolutely true. But they also have the Iron Dome, which protects Israel, which is why more often than not, Hamas isn't able to hit its targets. And I think that's great. I'm glad that they have that defense capability. This is what that defense capability looks like. Just take a look at this video. This is F2. So let's stop pretending like both sides are equal. Let's be real about who the aggressors were, especially in this more recent conflict. And the United States is funding that aggression. And there are calls by progressive lawmakers to maybe question whether that US aid makes sense when it's being used to brutalize people who have been occupied.
Yeah, and when they chose to make the aid contingent on absolutely nothing. Like, usually when you are giving money, you can buy something with that, influence. That's what foreign aid is supposed to do. It's supposed to help, but it's also supposed to push countries in the direction of respect for human rights, things like that. Our government chose not to do that. Like they don't want there to be conditions, because if there are conditions and they're violated, which they certainly would be, then there have to be consequences. Like for instance, cutting off the aid, which they don't want to do. And so they just choose, it's just free money, just hand it out. Our government, who hates giving out money.
Yep.
In this
Especially
area,
to its own people.
they want it to be totally no strings attached. And that's a Republican thing, but it's also very much a Democrat thing. And also in terms of, like you were rightly pointing out, a lot of the political calculations of politicians like Netanyahu, it would be bad enough if around the world we had these right-wing leaders who make these bold promises about their ability to protect people, with the consequence that like human rights and democracy and all that will mostly go by the wayside if you allow these people to take power. That would be bad enough if they actually then did protect their people. But like, do you notice that they can't? That like the countries that have done the worst in regards to the pandemic are uniformly controlled by these populist right-wing leaders. That Netanyahu says he's going to keep people safe, and then he starts conflicts that result in people being killed. Sure, as you point out, Hamas is responsible. They fired the rockets, but arguably the rockets would not have been fired if the conflict hadn't been begun. So there are bad people on both sides. Some of them have far bigger guns than others. And so just start to notice the pattern. Like they tell you the same lies and they can't save you at the end of the day.
Again, people deserve peace and a life of dignity, and Benjamin Netanyahu is offering none of that. We got to take a break. When we come back, we're going to switch gears and talk a little bit about some positive moves by the Biden administration on investing in solar power. Come right back. Just want to give a quick shout out to our Twitch community, where you guys are going to enjoy lots of fantastic programming today after our bonus show, beginning with Happy Half Hour hosted by Brett Ehrlich. And then after Brett Ehrlich, the fun's not done yet, guys. The fun continues with Woznia. So make sure you subscribe to our Twitch channel, twitch.tv/TYT, to get all that fun programming and more. And you could, of course, subscribe for free through Amazon. So whenever you hear about Bezos bucks, that's what we're referring to. And that's exactly what Calm Like a Bomb wanted to share. 6 months Prime with 6 months of Bezos bucks on top of my membership. Calm Like a Bomb. I like your attitude. I know you're not calm at all. And you shouldn't be. You should be super excited because we're sharing stories together and we're just living life. We're living life, guys. Bookworm Dragon. 11 months tier 1, BB Junkie 10 months Prime with I like my Bezos bucks. I like that my Bezos bucks goes to TYT each month. Keep up the great work, guys. Thank you. Photo Chromax 3 months Prime. Bezos helicopter will mess with his hair. That's why he needs a second vessel. Here are my Bezos money. Or yes, thank you, thank you. That was a reference to the yacht story that we did earlier this week. RC Tycoon. 8 months Prime with hashtag Engineer Dragon, almost carried this dragon baby to term. Hashtag Bezos bucks to TYT. I don't know what that means.
A baby? When you hit, they say that when they hit 9 months as a
yeah, that's right. Anatomy.
I'll explain the whole thing to you.
Yeah, birds and beats. We'll talk about it later.
There's a lot.
Skittlebutt Dragon, 5 months tier 1 and gifted 5 subs. Thank you, thank you. K the DJ, Entel Dragon. K the D Gentle Dragon, got it. Also gifted a sub. Holly Beer Dragon gifted 5 subs. John Idarola, gifted a sub.
Why is that on there?
Did you gift a sub?
I did, but it was a while ago. Yeah, thank you.
Let me.
I want to get the party
Hold
started.
On, let me refresh this. I hope it's not like
no, it was today, but I was just trying to get the party started. You know.
Okay,
it's fun. Expand the community.
I like that, I like that. I also want to thank our new YouTube members, Cindy M, Caitlin Totter, A-Dubs, Caleb Olds, George or Georgie of PDX, and Molly says, thank you so much for becoming new members. I hope you guys enjoy our bonus show today, along with all the other fun members-only programming that comes along with being a member. And it's gonna be a good time. All right, I also wanna read some member comments before we run out of time. Gabby Marita says, isn't Netanyahu literally on trial right now for corruption and media bribery? Yes. Is he trying to start a war with Palestinians to distract from that? Yes. The answer is yes. Naudius Maximus, this gas shortage is just trying to distract us from the hoarding toilet paper. Don't listen, keep hoarding toilet paper. I don't think you guys need to hoard toilet paper anymore. I think you're good, but you should.
Probably.
I haven't done it yet, but maybe invest in a bidet. I heard that it's pretty fun. I'm not fun, but it's good. Anyway, let's get back to the show.
Too late, you said fun.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the show. Anna and John with you. John Iadarola is the host of The Damage Report on TYT Network. You would think that we have similar audiences, but no. Little bit of crossover, but not much, guys, not much. You better be plugging my show too.
Which one? No, I've heard that there's not. I feel like on Twitch it's a much higher overlap. I see the same in a lot of shows, but yeah, apparently not. But yeah, you do the Young Turks, and it's not bad actually. I've grown to
it's pretty good.
Accept it.
Get out of here. Anyway.
I like some days more than others. Those Wednesdays, those are good shows.
Wednesdays are good shows. I don't know. Let's see. Some of you guys are like, I don't know about the solo hour. Some of you guys like it. But
everybody likes it.
No, some people like to have me and Cenk together. For me, I don't know. Sometimes I prefer a little bit of alone time. You know, I like a little bit of solitary. But I also, of course, love doing the show with Cenk. Well, look, John, you are the renewable energy / climate change expert over here at TYT. You're the one, like you've taken that mantle. So I saved this story to discuss with you. You ready?
I can't wait.
Let's do it. The Biden administration has approved America's first large-scale offshore wind project, and the construction of the project is expected to begin this summer. Exciting news. Everyone's pretty excited about it, with the exception of course, Republicans, wealthy people who own real estate on the shores of America, who are worried about the wind turbines obstructing their view. And then there's Donald Trump, who's terrified of wind turbines because he thinks wind causes cancer. So the Vineyard Wind Project calls for up to 84 turbines to be installed in the Atlantic Ocean, about 12 nautical miles off the coast of Martha's Vineyard, Massachusetts. Together, they could generate about 800 megawatts of electricity, enough to power about 400,000 homes. That's a pretty big deal.
That's a lot.
It is a lot, and I'm excited about this. This is fantastic. I mean, obviously Biden is at least a little serious about pivoting to renewable energy. This project has been approved, and by the way, it would be much more. It would produce much more electricity than the country's 2 existing wind farms that produce a combined 42 megawatts of electricity. In addition to this Vineyard Wind Project, a dozen other offshore wind projects on the East Coast are under federal review. So likely there's more to come. And the Biden administration revived the Vineyard Wind Project in March as part of its larger push to tackle climate change. The $2.8 billion project is a joint venture of the energy firms Avangrid Renewables and Copenhagen Infrastructure Partners. So John, are you excited?
Yeah, and of course, yeah. I mean, these sorts of wind farms are far more popular and well established off in Europe, around both the UK and around countries like Denmark and Norway and all of that, far bigger ones, by the way, including international collaboration between multiple countries on things like this. We could, in theory, get involved in that. We could be doing that with Mexico. We could be doing that with Canada. Hell, we have military bases all over the world. We could be doing this around the globe, and I'm glad that Biden is more in favor of it. When they say that those other projects are under review, I would like more information about the timeline to see whether those will actually get approved. Because if you wait long enough, then I don't know, will President Tucker Carlson approve of them in a few years? I mean, who knows? But you saw the price tag there, $2.8 billion. That's nothing.
Yeah, I agree.
It's multiple small cities worth of electricity. There should not be a home on the East Coast that is not powered by wind energy. And honestly, maybe I'm an idiot, I don't know. I'm not like the head of the Department of Transportation or something, but it seems to me like just put money into it until eventually you're like, hey, we're not using some of this, then stop. Until you reach that point, just keep doing it. And this should not be controversial. The Republican Party says that they're for energy independence. This is what true energy independence actually looks like. Not caring about whether some pipeline eventually gets hacked or whatever. We have that possibility. Offshore, on land wind energy production as well as solar. We should be investing 10, 100 times more than what we are. And maybe Biden is an opportunity to move in that direction, but even he doesn't seem to be prioritizing it the way that I would want him to. But this is good. John. This is good news.
I like it. No. You've got the finger on the pulse. Like I think you're right. I mean, look, I have such low expectations for the Biden administration that whenever he does anything remotely correct or right, I get excited, right? But understand that that's where I'm coming from. I think that your standards are the right standards to have. I also want to just quickly bring up that while we're excited about the opportunity to invest in renewable energy to effectively combat climate change, there are some who are very much concerned about their coastal properties. And look, this seems like a legitimate concern. Cancer. Donald Trump not happy about this. If you can recall, this is why.
If you have a windmill anywhere near your house, congratulations. Your house just went down 75% in value. And they say the noise causes cancer. You tell me that one, okay? You know, the thing makes it so.
So it's actually pretty exciting because we do need affordable housing. So if we can kill two birds with one stone, invest in renewable energy and lower property values so we can actually afford to buy homes. Sounds pretty good, but of course, everything he said there was a lie. The property values don't go down, and obviously
It was part lie, it was mostly stupid. Lie is like intent to deceive. Stupid is just look at him, come on. Is this why those mayoral candidates in New York got the housing prices wrong? Did they think that there was a bunch of wind activity along the coast of New York or something?
That must be it. That's why the mayoral candidates thought that the median home value in Brooklyn is $100,000.
Yeah, watching that video, there are millions of Americans who are like, I would strangle American democracy for that man. Of all people, that's who you would end democracy to install as the permanent leader. Yeah, it's absolutely insane. By the way, can we put up that B-roll of the turbines again?
Yes, let's do it.
So we were showing that before. And look, I'm not, an interior decorator. I'm not known for my great grasp of aesthetics, but what's wrong with that?
No,
look at that. That is perfectly fine.
I'm gonna be honest. I will be honest with the audience. First off, let me just say that aesthetic appeal is nothing. It means nothing when you're, weighing that against, the threat of humanity no longer existing on this planet because they can't exist on this planet. Like, I'd rather save the future of humanity than be visually pleased by what I see.
Yeah.
With that said, no, the turbines they're creepy.
Wait,
they're creepy.
Bring it up again as we talk about this.
They are. Let's just be real. Let's be honest. I don't want to lie to the audience. Everyone knows it. I know it. You know it. The American people know it. There are wind turbines in Palm Springs. Hold.
I like those ones.
They're so creepy, John.
You drive through it. It's like, hey, the future. I like that. That reminds me of the things that you blow into. That you hold on a little stick.
This guy.
I mean, sure, they don't look as good as like coal plants or whatever, or as I call them, smoke shows.
That's the point.
But anyway,
all of it is ugly. So yeah.
But those aren't. Am I crazy? Can we do a poll? We do polls, right?
I can't do a poll on the spot.
Okay,
but you
well,
guys
tomorrow,
can write in.
maybe a poll.
You guys can write in super chats. Let us know
don't
what you
have a
think.
problem with it.
Like I believe
Install
me,
one in my front yard.
I don't think we should prevent the development of renewable energy based on the aesthetic appeal of the technology, right? Like, no, that's not what I'm saying at all. But I have to admit, I'm giving you my honest opinion, they are creepy looking. When they're all grouped together, like the Palm Springs ones creep me out.
They just staring at you.
I'm sorry. But okay, let me also just
Plus they give you cancer.
They do not give you cancer.
The windmills.
I should be president forever.
Okay.
Windmills.
Okay, let me give you his statement about this latest project in Martha's Vineyard. So, where is it? Okay, he says, Trump says, congratulations to Martha's Vineyard in Massachusetts for the privilege they will have in looking at massive windmills that have been approved by the Biden administration and are being built in China, of course, as part of an extraordinarily large wind farm. My of this project is that it's actually going to create US jobs because American unionized workers will be installing
and maintaining them,
wind turbines.
Yeah, plus it's 12 miles off the coast. Who cares? Who cares?
Exactly.
And it's 84 of them. Who cares?
Look, I agree with you, John. I'm not saying that we should avoid.
I'm gonna win you over someday. I'm gonna win you over to renewable energy.
You really think they're cool looking?
I am being completely dead serious. At least the B-roll that we show, I am totally fine with both of those.
That's lovely B-roll, but you see like a beautiful blue sky in the background, and like look at that coast.
We have oil derricks, like in the like my drive home goes through an oil field.
I know.
There's so much worse.
And that's ugly too.
Drive through El Segundo.
Windmills.
Those big power plants. I don't have a problem at all with them.
I don't have a problem.
In my backyard, yes, in my backyard. I'm a YIMBY. I want to see them there.
Okay, great, cool, good for you. We got to take a break. When we come back, criminals for Trump, that story continues developing. We've got that and more when we come back. Everyone's losing their minds because I think wind turbines are ugly, but it's okay. Look, everyone has their own aesthetic, whatever. And it's not for me, but it doesn't mean I'm against them. I'm very much in favor of them. And by the way, John is absolutely right. Yeah, all of the other fossil fuel related equipment that we see laying around is pretty ugly. So it's not like I'm trying to do a comparative analysis here. I'm just saying, like all of it. I like minimalism. You stop it, John. All right, I'm gonna go do this rapid fire of super chats. Another name says, as someone who works in IT, if an employee double clicking a malicious file brings mechanical systems to a halt, you've done everything wrong. That's a reference to the Colonial Pipeline story that we did, and I agree with you, even though I am not someone who works in IT. Jason AK907 says, Anna, they aren't creepy, referring to the windmills. You should be careful what you declare the truth. If not for Dragon Daddy, we'd all be lost, especially since they save lives. You guys, I'm in favor of the wind turbines. I'm allowed to not think they're pretty. It's okay. It's okay to say that. And also be viciously in favor of renewable energy, which I am.
Windmills.
Please don't be mad at me, guys. Please, I feel bad that I was honest. Zoltan Hall says, it never ceases to amaze me how the same people who spout conspiracy theories of child sacrifices and pedophilia are quick to turn a blind eye to sexual wrongdoings by anyone in the GOP and downplay mass shootings on schools. 100%. Absolutely. And I'm guessing that you were talking about the Jim Jordan story we did in the first hour, and you're absolutely right. Alan Smith, your pick, Anna, a skyline sunset with wind turbines or oil pumps? I side with John, hashtag Dragon Squad. Jeez, I feel like I'm being ganged up on. And I would go with the wind turbines. See? Quelly Walker says, they got Liz back for the moron. Now he won't tell they all participated in insider trading. Okay, I'm glad I read that again. I know I read that comment earlier in the show because joke's on us. Everyone knows that they engage in insider trading and there are no consequences.
Yep.
Members of Congress outperform the S&P 500.
They're just smarter than us, I think.
They're just smarter than us, guys. They're just expert investors, duh.
Did they put it all in Dogecoin or what?
I mean, obviously they do insider trading. It's so infuriating. By the way, Quelly Walker also says they should have fought back by not voting for the imbecile third party. Absolutely, just do it. Yeah, I agree. Anyway, we gotta get back to the show. See you there.
Windmills.
People have spoken. I'm wrong, you're right. Before you get to the poll that our Twitch community started, I'm gonna read a few of these comments on TYT Live, hashtag TYT Live. Abolish qualified immunity says, no, Anna Kasparian, the turbines are majestic. And with the repetition, they're visually pleasing. Sure, yes, that is your opinion. Like Kim says, I'm sorry, Anna, it's not an opinion, it's a fact. But John Iadarola is right. The windmills don't look creepy, they look neat.
They look neat and majestic and statuesque. And you keep pitching this as a difference of opinion. No, it's a fact, you're wrong.
Okay,
I don't understand when you're gonna accept
that. You know, that's just like your opinion, man.
That's what the audience is telling me, except not really. They're not saying it's your opinion. They're saying, we disagree with you, you're wrong. And what was the poll?
The poll, I don't know exactly what the results were, but it was, those are some sexy buy-ins is apparently winning by a landslide. And I think it's time we got a hashtag Anna is canceled party trending.
Don't cancel me. I'm sorry, I love the turbines. In fact, I'm gonna install one, not outside my house, inside my house.
Damn.
In my bedroom, I wanna look at it as I'm falling asleep. I wanna look at it as I'm making love to my husband. That's how much I love them. They turn me on. Don't cancel.
I feel like we've won her over. Okay.
All right, let's get to our next story. The founder of Students for Trump, a gentleman by the name of John Lambert, has been sentenced to 13 years in, no, not years, 13 months. It's very important clarification. 13 months in prison for posing as a lawyer and also defrauding people, which explains a lot in regard to his support for Donald Trump. Now, Lambert, from August of 2016 through April of 2018, advertised himself online as a New York attorney from an elite law school who had worked with hundreds of clients in Europe and the United States. Using the alias Eric Pope, he lured at least 6 individuals and corporations into paying him to resolve credit issues, draft a will, resolve a dispute with a former employee, and help with corporate and intellectual property law, prosecutors said. His lawyers tried to get him off easy by saying like, look, he's young, he's just real excited about things and was naive and didn't realize what he was doing was wrong. Gary Peters, for instance, that's Lambert's lawyer, said that Lambert naively hoped to get early experience in the legal world by posing as a lawyer. That's how it happened. That's how you get real world experience, guys. You defraud people by posing as a lawyer. And that's how you learn, duh. Also, Lambert was inspired by the legal drama Suits, where paralegals get away with pretending to be lawyers, Peters said. But the judge was not buying it. US District Judge Valerie Caproni in Manhattan rejected defense efforts to portray John Tyler Lambert as a naive victim of a co-conspirator whose youthful exuberance made him think he could create a fake persona to learn the law and help others.
Okay, that's not about learning the law. It's about, like, I watch House. I wasted one lung and then I moved on. It was clearly a bad plan. This guy did it for 3 years. By the way, he did it 2016, 2017, 2018. Pretend to be a lawyer, pretend to be a lawyer, pretend to be a lawyer. Law school is only 3 years long.
But
just get your degree.
It's hard, John.
That it is probably pretty tough, but like you're pretending to be a lawyer to make some money. Just become a lawyer and you'll make lots of money. It's a way better scam in that it's not a scam. Well, they're kind of scams anyway, but it's legal scams.
It's a little bit of a misconception that all lawyers do well. They don't. There are a lot of lawyers, there are a lot of people who go to law schools and have trouble getting hired, or if they get hired, they have trouble making partner.
There could be a lot of debt.
There's a lot of debt. So I want to make sure that we cover all our bases here. But at the same time, becoming a lawyer, getting through law, getting accepted into a good law school is tough. You think that this guy has any interest in that? No, he just wanted to defraud people.
He's got an entrepreneurial spirit. Also, I feel a little bit bad for him in that his lawyers don't seem very good. And it makes me wonder, are we sure that his lawyers aren't just like him in glasses and a mustache? The guy's got a track record. Have we seen him and his lawyers in the same room at the same time?
Well, his lawyers were in fact awful because one of the statements from the judge here was that Lambert was a cold-blooded fraudster who cared not a whit about the victims of this fraud. And he didn't, of course he didn't.
Sounds like Trump.
But that's exactly
like
right.
Trump.
How many people, whether it was members of his campaign, members of his administration, his supporters, like his supporters who started organizations under his name, like how many of those people have been either investigated and then convicted for criminal wrongdoing?
And none of it matters. Like all of those people, the more of like the people in the Trump orbit, and I mean like people in his administration or the wider orbit, people like this guy and Lynn Wood and Jenna Ellis and all that, like every extra criminal is just more proof in their mind that all the previous criminals were just a product made up by the deep state, that none of it matters. Well, if it's so easy to like have people charged and convicted who are in an administration that controls the DOJ and all of that. Well, now you got Biden, he controls the DOJ, start locking up his people. If it's so easy to frame them for crimes, why don't you do it too, right wing? It's actually kind of difficult, and he was just particularly talented at surrounding himself by criminals.
So the judge, aside from the 13-month prison sentence, has ordered him to forfeit $46,000 and restitution of more than $21,000 as she expressed disappointment that Lambert so far had not tried to get a job to begin repaying victims. I mean, the judge knows who this guy is. She's the one who sentenced him and said that he's a fraudster. So why would he get a normal job and actually pay back his victims that way?
Clearly he doesn't like working. No, he's gonna claim it's like Biden just made the unemployment stuff too high. I didn't feel motivated. Guarantee.
That would be really funny. By the way, speaking of all of the various Trump associates who were later convicted of serious crimes, you know that Michael Cohen has a podcast now?
Yep. Yeah.
That's it. Just wanted to share that with you all.
I mean, anybody can have a podcast.
Has a podcast that Cenk Uygur was on recently.
Was he really?
Yeah.
Oh, I have to listen to that.
No, I love Cenk. He's far more open-minded than I am. I'm gonna put it that way. But every time he mentioned going on Michael Cohen's podcast, Like my eyes couldn't roll harder.
Yeah.
Like they were stuck in the back of my head at one point. I was like, please stop bringing up that you're on that podcast. You should listen to it. It might be good. Who knows?
Like Michael Cohen's obviously like really bad and like loyally worked for Trump for a long time. Didn't he like threaten the family members of one of the women they were trying to silence?
Yeah.
I don't remember for sure, but
I think it was Stormy Daniels.
He might be a bad guy. He just might be.
He's got a podcast, guys. Everyone check it out. Anyway, one final story for you in the main show, and then make sure you guys check us out in the bonus episode that follows. You can become a member by going to tyt.com/join. For now, though, let's talk about the University of Massachusetts that's now facing a lawsuit. 3 University of Massachusetts at Amherst students are now suing the school after the school suspended them following a photo showing the trio partying without masks on. Now, the school had a policy apparently indicating that attending off-campus parties without masks will lead to a form of punishment. And in this case, they were punished for a full school year and they didn't get their $16,000 in tuition refunded. So another student snitched on them by showing school administrators the photo of them at the party without the mask on. That person seems great. And no.
I mean,
we'll talk about it. Let me give you more details. I am not in favor of this. But after losing their cases, they were kicked out of the school entirely, forfeiting their entire academic semester. I'm sorry, not the whole year, the semester, and $16,000 of tuition each, which the school will not refund. The families of the 3 students have hired a lawyer and are planning to file a lawsuit against the university over this suspension. And the parents said that the students were treated unfairly because there's another case of students engaging in similar festivities unmasked, and they didn't face the same consequences. The university hosted a parade/event to celebrate the UMass hockey team's national championship win, violating every single one of the violations they accused these girls of. It also violated a standing executive order by Governor Charlie Baker that says no parades, no festivals. So those athletes didn't have to deal with a suspension. They didn't have to forfeit $16,000 in tuition. So there was a double standard here. I think that's relevant to the story. John, what say you?
I'm worried about the precedent being set where student athletes can get away with things other students can't. This is new and worrisome. No, they definitely should not be kicked out for a semester. If they are kicked out for a semester, they definitely should get their money back. I have been very hard for more than a year on anti-maskers or people who don't take it seriously and all that. That said, this is way too harsh of a punishment.
I agree.
Insane. I also am not as mad at the snitcher as you are, but that said, you can't kick someone out for a whole semester over that.
I agree. Yeah, look, I'm not furious with the person who decided to make a decision that made these students lose $16,000 in tuition. I'm not as angry as maybe I'm presenting myself to be. No, I'm pretty mad. Like, what are you doing?
Who are you more disgusted by? That student or a wind turbine? Which makes you sicker when you see it?
I love wind turbines. I think wind turbines are so sexy. Their curves, their majestic appeal, they're just sheer. Look at how large they are. They're just big. They're large and in charge. I love them. I love them. They're great.
Windmills.
But a nice thick turbine. That's what I want.
I love nice thick turbines. They're my favorite. Okay.
I apologize.
But getting back to the story at hand, I'm upset with the university because they went way too far, and when they were caught with this double standard in refusing to punish the athletes who engaged in similar activities, they just kind of doubled down. Like, they were very defiant. In fact, the school said this is the vice chancellor for student affairs. All students involved will have their appropriate due process, but under no circumstances will they continue as a university student in the interim. This selfish and disrespectful attitude contributes to the spread of the virus and puts us all at risk. Yeah, but please acknowledge that you guys have a double standard here and the athletes aren't being met with the same harsh consequences.
Yeah, and again, like if they still kick them out but give them their money back, I would not be happy with that. But like, you're Amherst, you can afford it. You can give them their money back at the very least. It's already going to be devastating to their lives, to their careers, their reputations, families, all that. It's just too much. It's just not a rational response.
I agree. We agree on this. We want to hear what you guys think. So if you're watching this as a video on demand, leave your comment in the comment section below. And if you're watching right now, you can write in our member comments or super chats. In fact, since we've got a little bit of time left, I'm gonna read some of those comments right now, starting with Kimberly, who writes in our super chat section about foreign policy. It says, US foreign policy has promoted right-wing, business-friendly authoritarianism across the world. Now the chickens are coming home to roost. Kimberly, you are right on point. Finger on the pulse. I don't know why I've been saying that a lot lately, but it's one of my favorite things to say.
You could, yeah.
And Vinny says, your thoughts on the gain of function BS is being pushed on Rogan, Sager, and the Weinsteins. Oh, what? Not my thoughts. Anyway, we got to get to the post game. We'll address that in the post game show or the bonus episode, whatever you guys want to call it. See you there.
I'm old enough that I remember when Captain Crunch put the berries in it.
Yay, crunch berries!
And I was like, ooh, the fake berries.
Remember?
We're gonna try that.
We did a story back in the day about how a woman sued, I don't know, General Mills.
She'd been eating it for 4 years, believing that it was actual berries. Yeah. She's like, these aren't real berries at all. Yeah. I'm like, I got news for you. Captain Crunch isn't really a captain or a person. Joining me now, legendary whistleblower and American hero, Edward Snowden. First question is, hey, where are you?
I'm in my apartment in Moscow.
All of a sudden, in the studio, Jim Gaffigan, everybody.
Mental illness is, completely undiagnosed in our society.
It's not about a particular administration. It's about a broken system of power, and through that, really, the instrumentalization of a system of not justice, but injustice.
People understand whether they claim to deny climate change or not. Our collective house is in crisis. We're also dealing with the legacy of 40 years of economic policies that have made people's lives more precarious.
Sometimes you got to force people into their humanity. Sometimes you have to shake people into empathy.
Senator Elizabeth Warren joins us in the studio.
Healthcare is a basic human right, and we are fighting for basic human rights.
In order to actually achieve that vision of everyone having access to the same resources and getting to determine the outcome of their life, we have a lot of work to do, and it needs to start right now.
Here's something you may not know. When you deposit your money in a big bank, it doesn't just sit, safe and secure, in a vault. Instead, your money could end up building oil pipelines, mining for coal, or drilling in the Arctic. So if you're concerned about the planet, give your money something good to do. Make the move to green with Aspirations Fossil Fuel Free account and join the thousands each week who are switching to save their dollars and save the planet at the same time.
Welcome to the Damage Report. I'm John Iadarola. This is gonna be a big one.
What Donald Trump has done as president has cut taxes for the wealthy and made life better for rich people. But he's made life worse for poor people.
We're making America great again by throwing more money at the military to destroy other countries because that makes us great instead of investing it in ourselves.
That it's Donald Trump and it's Stephen Miller. The choosing is based on wanting to create cruel and inhumane conditions to scare other people away from ever coming to the United States.
The opportunity to make money off of tragedy is the American way.
There's only one place to put garbage people: in the trash.
We've never had so much access to so much information with so little idea of what the hell is going on.
What does enforcing our borders have to do with traumatizing children? Absolutely nothing.
I think a sane person could say the current situation we have right now is radical. But what we're doing is literally making the world more like hell. That's a warning sign.
ShopTYT.com now has books. One of them is Ryan Grimm's book, We've Got People. That's a saying that AOC said, they've got money, we've got people. It's the best tracing of the AOC victory I have seen anywhere. It's the most accurate, and it's got great details. The book actually goes all the way back to Jesse Jackson and how he's the original Bernie Sanders. If you want to know how we're gonna win going forward, those lessons are super important, and they're in Ryan's book. So check it out right now at ShopTYT.com. We found the perfect person to lead the army, Allison Hartson.
The establishment media works hand in glove with our corporate legislators, and our corporate legislators work hand in glove with the corporation. And we're going to make it so that it's a decentralized force throughout the country so that we can quickly identify stories, quickly identify troll farms, and go in and neutralize the enemy, and then start building responsible media throughout the country and on every platform available.
Girl, I wish you would.
Hey, that's Anna.
Windmills, wing.
Hey guys, welcome to our bonus episode. And I wanted to address a super chat comment that I read toward the end of the main show. And it was written in the form of a question, but when I read it, it didn't have the punctuation, which is why I was like, what?
So it seemed like a statement.
It seemed like a statement, but here's the question from Vinny Holiday. Your thoughts on the gain of function BS being pushed by Rogan, Sauger, and the Weinsteins? My thoughts are that it's BS. In fact, it was a story we were gonna cover yesterday.
Is that the Rand Paul thing?
Yeah, and I cut the story because I'm like, I'm just tired of these clowns. And then like you have to get into what gain of function is. And it's just, I'm not gonna get into like the nitty-gritty scientific use of that. But the whole point of it was to push this conspiracy theory about how there's a possibility that the coronavirus was leaked from a lab in Wuhan, China. That's what this is about. And I'm done with it. I'm done with it. I'm done with it. Yeah. So it's a bonus episode. I'm so fucking sick of this shit. I'm so sick of it. Anyway, I can't take it. Those are my thoughts.
You have thoughts, it turns out.
I do have thoughts,
yeah.
I do.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's talk about one serious story, and then we'll talk about
fun.
Yeah, I'm not as bold as I used to be because I, for some reason, can't say it.
What?
You'll know what I'm talking about later. Let's do the Andrew Yang story first, though. I'm talking about
what?
The fun story we're gonna do in a minute.
I don't know what you mean.
You
know. To my Andrew Yang.
I'm talking about Buttfucker 3000. Okay.
Jeez.
Okay. It's a story.
This is a professional show, Anna.
It is. But we get a little
first bidets and now
we get a little crazy on the bonus episode. Okay, let's talk about the serious stuff first, though. Okay.
That'll be our number 2 story.
Mayoral hopeful, New York City mayoral hopeful Andrew Yang is now apologizing after he issued a statement on the violence and ongoing conflict in Israel and, of course, Gaza. Initially, he said, I'm standing with the people of Israel who are coming under bombardment attacks and condemn. He says that he condemns the Hamas terrorists. The people of NYC will always stand with our brothers and sisters in Israel who face down terrorism and persevere. So he got a lot of blowback for that. Because if you know, if you've been following the story and you actually care about the facts, his framing there makes it seem as though the aggressors were the Palestinians, that poor Israeli government, they were doing nothing wrong and they were brutally attacked, they're being bombarded. That's not what happened. And we've explained what actually happened. This aggression toward Palestinians began a month ago with Benjamin Netanyahu limiting their ability to practice their religion during the month of Ramadan by raiding the Al-Aqsa Mosque and of course by attempting to evict Palestinians from their homes in East Jerusalem. And the reason why Benjamin Netanyahu did that was to garner support and deflect from the fact that he is facing criminal prosecution for corruption and he has failed to form a government. So this is what authoritarian leaders do when they want to garner support. They fearmonger, they create violent and hostile situations and essentially try to persuade voters to support them in order to keep people safe, but that's the exact opposite of what Netanyahu is really doing. So that's a little bit of context so you can understand why Yang was facing the blowback that he did.
Yeah.
Now, a mosque that he was supposed to have a campaign event at decided to cancel that event after he issued that statement. And they said this: we have nothing against him. We are against his words. When he put out this tweet against Palestinians, everyone started calling me, community leaders, Muslims, and other people, because they didn't like what he tweeted. And then he added that he feared including Yang in the event. He didn't want to I want to mess up with my 400 family distribution here because of one person.
Yeah, it has an actual function that could be totally thrown off by people going there specifically because of Yang.
Yeah, exactly. So that was the immediate consequence that he suffered, along with some of the blowback. But then later he issued a bit of an apology and also says that he is actually very much concerned about Palestinian lives. Here's what his statement looked like. In the statement, he claims, "I mourn for every Palestinian life taken before its time, as I do for every Israeli. Suffering and pain and violence and death suffered by anyone hurts us all. All people want to," all right, yeah, let's keep that up. Support of a people does not make one blind to the pain and suffering of others. Again, most everyone simply wants to be able to live and pray in peace. And the statement goes on. Maybe we can go to the next one and just really emphasize that he's now claiming, "They were of course correct. I mourn for every Palestinian life taken before its time, as I do for every Israeli. Support of people does not make one blind to the pain and suffering of others." Now, Ken Klippenstein pointed something out that's really interesting. How do you use so many words to say so little?
Yeah.
Ken Klippenstein, finger on the pulse.
Always. There's a lot of fingers, a lot of pulses, but he's got one always. Yeah, so Yang, who is like this free-thinking, independent politician, took 2 tries to make something roughly as good as Gal Gadot's statement on the issue. Like if you are sick of mealy-mouthed, weak, careful Democratic politician statements on Israel that both sides strip out all the context. He didn't even do that the first time. There was no acknowledgement. I don't think Palestine existed in his first statement. Like there was no acknowledgement whatsoever of the deaths. It's just some terrorists attack Israel, they can do whatever they want. The second one is a little bit better. Like half of it is kind of self-serving, like everyone loves me because I'm so free thinking or whatever. And then it was, I don't want civilians to die, but I'm not going to acknowledge anything of what's happening or the continual cycle or American influence on it. None of it. The disproportionate use of and willingness to use force, the fact that the death toll is nothing like 50-50. And so it is better, but it's not good.
I just think that people need to be real about candidates in these types of political races. Because I think that I said this in the initial story that we covered. I think that we give candidates far too much credit and think far too much about their knowledge. Like Andrew Yang has been consistently awful on answering questions pertaining to foreign policy. We saw quite a bit of that in the 2020 Democratic primary. He believes that we should support Israel unequivocally, regardless of what they do. He made that clear when he was running in the 2020 presidential election. I say that because, sure, he's trying to backtrack now because he understands that this could actually hurt him politically. But I don't know if, in fact, I doubt that he understands or has gone out of his way to read the nuances of this conflict. I don't know if he knows the historical context. All I know is we need to stop acting as if anyone who runs for Congress or anyone who runs for position as mayor, whatever it is, let's stop pretending that just like the very nature of them running means that they're super informed on these issues and they have something interesting to say. More often than not, they have no idea what they're talking about. And I think that's the case here. I don't think that Andrew Yang has really given much thought to that conflict.
Yeah, well, I should hope not.
Right.
Because it would suck if his position on something as consequential as the continued existence of so many Palestinian lives was basically just a scrapbook of political interests in the area he's running in. But if this is the product of him seriously thinking about it for a while, that's worse. Because then it's actually representative of something having to do with his value system. And I don't want to believe that that's what it is. But we've now had 2 versions of his statement. Maybe the third will be better. Maybe, but look, all I'm saying is we've given some credit to Andrew Yang for some of his contributions to American politics. We've had him on, I believe, both the Young Turks. We had him on the Damage Report very early on in the primary. That said, he is running for mayor, but he's also trying to stay politically relevant, potentially for a future presidential run. He is going to want to once again get the Yang Gang geared up and run for president someday. Well, this is when you're showing us what sort of leader you're gonna be, who you care to appeal to. And I know that when he eventually runs for president again, he's gonna want progressives to support him. Well, what are you doing now? You know what progressives value in this topic, and you don't seem to care about it literally at all, even if people die as a result of it. But so just a heads up for later on.
You know, the thing about US media and also just like the culture in the United States versus pretty much anywhere else in the world is that Americans aren't encouraged to care about anything that's happening in other countries.
Yep.
We're just not. I remember when I traveled out of the country for the first time in 2007. And I was in a group, like a young group of people backpacking throughout Europe. And I was like shocked at how much everyone in that group knew about US politics and how little I knew about what was happening in their country. Whether a lot of the people in that group were Australian, there were South Africans, and I was just like, man, you guys are way more informed about the United States than I am about the political climate in your own countries. And of course I knew some things, but not to the extent that they knew. And it's because we're not encouraged. In fact, we're like almost discouraged from learning about other countries and what's happening. So I'm not trying to come across as like, how can you expect Andrew Yang to know about this conflict? No, it's most Americans, because of the nature of the culture here, are just discouraged from learning about these things. It's not covered in depth in our media, and it's just a very narcissistic, self-interested country. Like that's just how Americans are, unfortunately.
True. That is true.
So that's where I'm coming from. Okay, well let's move on. Let's talk about this next thing. So Brett pitched this. Okay?
I'm not surprised to find that out, by the way.
Brett pitched this and it made me laugh so hard that I couldn't help but want to share it with you guys. So let's do it. Let's talk about it. It was a routine morning in the court of Jeffrey Middleton, a judge from St. Joseph County, Michigan, when Nathan Saxton logged in to respond to drug paraphernalia charges. And unfortunately, he didn't cross his T's, he didn't dot his I's, and he was met with some pushback right off the bat. Let's watch.
Good morning, sir. What's your name?
Me?
Yeah, you, yes.
Nathaniel Saxton, sir.
Your name's not but 3000, you yo-ho. Logging into my court with that as your screen name.
Why would
that in a little bit? What kind of idiot logs into court like that? What's your name again?
Nathaniel Saxton, sir, but I don't believe that I typed anything like that in.
Well, that's what it says.
Well, I apologize. That should not be.
Yeah, you should. I'll put you in the waiting room. You can sit in limbo for a while and think about what you call yourself online.
We're gonna play that video again because I want you to pay attention to the top right-hand corner of the screen where Alexander Heath is. He's the only person who failed to maintain his composure as this exchange was going down. But obviously we had to, to censor a portion of his screen name on the show, but I'm sure you can put your imagination behind figuring out what.
Yeah, or Google it or whatever. You'll find some stuff. There's resources.
Don't do that. Unless you want to. No hate, no judgment.
Yeah. his reaction, I don't know. Do you think, like, I'm wondering if, because obviously in the Zoom you get a very narrow window on the guy. If you were to see a wider shot, is his like little brother laughing in the background? But did he put it there? Or did Nathaniel Saxon name himself that? Or was this guy thrown under the butt bus?
He's facing drug paraphernalia charges, and I would like to give him enough credit to assume that he's not stupid enough to knowingly have that screen name displayed on his Zoom.
But who would ever put that on Zoom for anything?
Yeah,
who are you hanging out with?
I think that he might have been pranked. And I don't know. I mean, look, I am not the type of person who has a lot of faith in humans, to be honest, from all the things that we've covered and all the things that we've seen. But I am naive enough to believe that he did not do that. And if he had done it previously as some sort of joke, he forgot about it and had no idea that that was in fact still the displayed name on his Zoom account.
Yeah.
That's what I'd like to believe.
Yeah, well, whether it was his own thing or a prank, it wrecked him. And you need to, before you go into court, you need to analyze your settings very carefully.
Absolutely, no ifs, ands, or buts about it.
Exactly. By the way, if we can go to that video one more time, he's getting thrown under the butt bus for his name. But if you go to it, like nobody's taking this seriously. Joseph Christ is like, hey, welcome to my room, like leaning back. Alexander Heath, what are you doing, buddy?
He's laughing. That's what Alexander Heath is doing.
The women are taking it seriously. Honestly, Troy Middleton's looking real casual with the long flowing judicial locks there.
I would like to give Samantha Wells a lot of credit because she is just stone cold, like no expression whatsoever. Caitlyn though, Caitlyn did have to cover her face at one point. There she is. Do not laugh. This judge is not joking around.
My favorite part is the 3,000. It just makes it so much more fun.
No, my favorite part is
from the future.
Is Judge Middleton calling him a yo-ho?
A yo-ho, yeah.
A yo-ho, but he doesn't have to be so anal about this, you know?
Oh my God. Oh my God, what a classic TYT sort of story.
It really is, it really is.
Yeah, yeah. Anyway, what's your name on Zoom? How many people right now are gonna make that their name on some social media thing?
I don't know.
Yeah.
But my name on Zoom is Anna Kasparian. Like yeah.
Not even 3,000? Lame.
Maybe I should consider that. Maybe I should consider that.
Anyway, okay, that was good.
That was really good.
Yeah. Do you have anything else?
I don't actually. No, but I could come up with something. Let me think. Oh no, maybe not that.
What?
You think of something.
I don't know.
We always have so much to talk about, John. We're Biffy and Buffy.
Sure we do. I mean, immediately the things that leap into my mind are stuff that we can't do on air. But I've been building stuff. I know that you like wood.
I did. I love wood, and I wanted to bring that up, but I didn't know if you wanted to. So let's discuss.
I mean, only very briefly, but yeah, I was inspired by you to start building stuff. So I don't know if anyone, you probably can't notice, but my nails are all like dyed black because I've been staining the combination dog bed nightstand that I have created from scratch. It's like an elevated thing that fits a dog bed because our dogs can't both fit on our bed because it's too small, but they want to feel elevated like they're cool, and a little bit of a nightstand. I made that into one thing.
Do you do you encourage Hilo, your dog, to sleep in his dog bed, or do you?
No, he only sleeps in our bed ever.
Dude, I'm so jealous.
He would never sleep anywhere else. He would lose it.
Look, you guys know how I feel about my dog. I'm obsessed with him, but
he likes his independence at night.
He's not a cuddler. Like Charlie is also, he doesn't like to cuddle. He's not a very affectionate dog. His affection starts and stops when I come home because he's so excited to see me.
Oh yeah, no, he's
very excited. But he doesn't like to cuddle. He used to like sleeping in the same bed as us, and now he doesn't. And so
Someday he will.
I get really
He'll cool
mad.
down.
Sometimes I'll take his doggy bed and I'll put it up on our dresser so he can't access it, and then he'll feel forced to sleep on the bed. And he loves our bed. When we're not in the bed, he sleeps on our bed.
What if you put his bed on your bed?
And we have a big bed. It's not a small bed. There's more than enough space for him.
Big bed, huge, beautiful,
Huge,
the
big
biggest bed.
Some people are saying it's the biggest bed they've ever seen. It's a special bed. It's a custom bed, a bed of which the likes you've never seen before.
Have you tried putting his bed on your bed?
Yeah, he doesn't like it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, he's a smart dog. No, he'll cool down someday, I think. But he loves a cuddler. He loves to sleep up against you. He lays up against you. He follows Arlene all day long throughout the house. He likes to lay like with his head like on like your leg, your arm, like looking at you. And he does this thing where if he's near you, he'll just like push his head into your body. It's the cutest cuddling ever.
I love it so much.
And the thing about Charlie is Charlie's so cute and so soft that it's kind of like, how dare you not cuddle with me, you little tease.
What a waste. What a waste of perfectly soft fur.
Perfectly soft like goose fur in his like front part right there. It's this like perfect puff of like a pillow. It's like, no, it's mine. You can't pet it.
Yeah. Okay, here's the other thing that I wanted to bring up. And I actually genuinely do want your advice. What do you think about knives?
I'm gonna need slightly more context.
What do you think about knives for protection?
Oh, like carrying a knife for protection?
Yeah, but like not any knife, right? Like I'm not talking about, I like the knives where you just go like, and it like.
Oh, you want like a butterfly knife?
Yes.
Okay, well I was the exact sort of kid growing up the exact sort of area that when I was in high school, there was nothing that seemed cooler than owning a butterfly knife and learning tricks.
I 100% agree with that, but not in childhood now.
Why do you want one now?
Because they're cool. Like
They
I don't
are
know if you've
cool.
watched Cobra Kai. But there were a few.
Well, yes, I have watched Cobra Kai. Not the newest season, but I've watched the past couple.
Same. What did you think about it? Christian thought it was cheesy. He
The first
hated
two
it.
seasons?
The first season. I haven't watched it.
It's the cheesiest show ever, but it's very good.
I like it too.
I love it.
Yeah.
The main guy is just, we went back and watched the movie because of that. It's so cool, I love it. It's so stupid. It's like, kids just aren't that into karate. And like the whole city's into karate. Everybody's into karate. There's fights breaking out left and right everywhere.
No,
That's
not just karate. After watching Warrior, I told you about Warrior, right? It's on HBO now, but it was initially on Showtime. Freaking fantastic show. A few of you actually took my recommendation and started watching it, and I love every one of you who wrote back and said that you enjoyed it. Thank you. It makes my day when someone likes my recommendation, but it's good, and I think you would actually really like it.
I've never heard of this.
Nando really likes it.
You're not talking about Warriors.
Warrior, no, Warrior.
Okay, not the movie.
Not the movie. It's Warrior. Again, it's a show on Showtime, but HBO has it on its video on demand.
It's martial arts.
Streaming, yes.
Okay.
And I want to learn. Like I think it's super cool.
Well, I mean, granted it's the pandemic, but we've talked about going to Krav Maga together.
Yes, I think Krav Maga is super cool.
Well, then let's do Krav Maga as soon as it's safe.
I want to be able to beat someone up.
Then you want Krav Maga.
Yeah.
That is going to be the best way to do it.
And not like out of nowhere. I don't want to like hurt innocent people. I love being underestimated, and that always happens in like intellectual settings, like when I'm about to do a debate or about to be on a panel. Usually they'll look at me and be like, "Oh, look at the dumb blonde. She's not gonna know what she's talking about." I'm like, and I love that because I always have like the upper hand. Like it's an advantage. I like that.
Yeah,
I also want to have that physically too.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's a good feeling. So I did Krav Maga for a few years, and it was the best shape I've ever been in. It felt so good. Like, oh God, Krav is so great. But also, because you've watched Cobra Kai, like you can do martial arts in the right way and become serene and responsible and all that, or you can do it in the pursuit of like all the wrong reasons. My friend Tremaine and I, when we were doing jiu-jitsu for a few years in college, we got very cocky. We didn't like fight random people, but like we were always ready to.
Yeah, of course.
After learning jiu-jitsu, yeah. No, but it's fun, and we should definitely do it.
I want to so bad.
I want to do Krav Maga. I need to get back into better shape for it, but we should definitely do Krav as soon as it's safe. Yeah.
I just like the idea of being like a literal ass kicker and being able to kick ass if I need to, right? If someone else is being hurt or if I'm being threatened.
And you have kicked people before.
I have.
So you have some past experience.
With good reason. I was assaulted, and I
definitely, yeah.
Yeah, and I fought back.
He deserved it.
No, I remember when there was a period of time when the men's rights activists were trying to, like, they were going after me pretty hard over that. So just for those of you who might have missed that story, it's from like the very early years of TYT when I shared it. I was on a power walk at the park by myself, and it was starting to get a little dark, but I was much younger and I really thought that I was invincible and nothing bad could possibly happen. But someone on a bicycle basically like rode right past me, and as he rode past me, he like slapped my butt as hard as he could. And that was the first time I'd ever been in any way physically violated. And if someone had told me ahead of time that I would feel the way I did in that moment, I wouldn't have believed them. But it was crazy how violated and scared I felt, and threatened.
Well, you know what could happen next.
Right, and I was by myself. Like, there was no one else around us. And then all of a sudden, he didn't get enough. So he rode around and was coming back for us to do it a second time. And when he did that, and I could see his shadow, as he was approaching, I kicked him off the bike and then,
which is badass,
kicked him in his ribs.
I mean, that's something the guy from Cobra Kai would have done.
I definitely was not as graceful and did not look like a professional karate fighter or whatever.
Well, it probably taught him a lesson.
I was scared, and when you're scared and like, the only thing that went through my mind, I still remember it, like I almost feel it, like as if it just happened yesterday. It was like this, I was terrified that like if I just kicked him off and tried to run away, he would easily get back on his bike and follow me and really hurt me.
Sure,
so that's why I was kicking him in his ribs.
Yeah.
And then I ran away really fast.
So you kicked him off the bike and then you kicked him in the ribs?
Yes. But I also blacked out. Like I was scared and kind of blacked out.
You hulked out, like you lost control of yourself and then came to. Wow. It's terrible that you had to go through that.
Maybe I don't need to learn any Krav Maga. Maybe I've already got it under my belt.
It'll be fun, you definitely should. But a little bit more about knives. I did, when I was in the Arctic, I carried it's a K-bar. It's like a long black like military knife or whatever. For both just general stuff, you need knives for random things that you do, and then also for self-defense theoretically against, like I'm gonna kill a polar bear with it or whatever. Right. But I did like having that around. Even though I did get in a little bit of trouble because I had a couple of them at one point and I forgot and I put them in my carry-on. And they were long, like machetes basically. So I had a couple of effectively like the blades like that long on these. And like the guy it buzzes and he starts pulling out these big knives.
Oh my God.
I swear it was a mistake, dude, sorry.
Oh my God.
Please let me fly.
Dude, can you imagine if you're a brown guy?
White knife privilege, that's what I had.
That's amazing, I didn't know that story. What are you, Misak? That's my dad. My dad, who I hate traveling with because he doesn't understand, he can't comprehend that you're not allowed to have liquids bigger than 3 ounces in your carry-on. You're just not allowed, they'll stop you. First time I traveled with him, he had literally a mega-sized bottle of Listermint.
For how long of a trip?
1 week. That was the first time we traveled together. We went to Hawaii. And then second time ever we flew together was to go on a little trip to Cancun. Again, 1 week. And I explained to him ahead of time, again, Dad, no liquids. Remember what happened with the Listermint? You remember? It was bad, you were very upset. Let's not do that again, okay? He's like, all right. This time it wasn't a Listermint. It was a giant, like not only a full-size bottle, it was one of those mega-sized bottles of hairspray. My dad barely has any hair on his head.
You gotta keep a firm hold on what's left. It's not going anywhere. No, but maybe he thought it's spray, it's not liquid. It's more of like a gas. I could understand that kind of.
I was so mad. I was angry like the rest of the day. I was like,
and that seems more like, I don't know what a Listermint's gonna do to a plane, but like a big thing of hairspray.
It was just
something with that.
Huge Tresemme. Anyway, all right, John, you're a rock star. Thank you for doing the show, and thank you for all of you watching and sharing your opinions. Please don't cancel me. I love wind turbines. They're the best. They're so hot.
They're so hot.
You guys have a great night. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.